Sometimes the truth wears a collar.
Copy that, we've got the proof.
Jake hadn't spoken to another human being in
$5 for a
47
sock
days.
And a ghost
He'd
waiting
counted.
at the door.
The lawyer handling the estate sale had tried to talk him out of it. Mr. Mercer, I'm legally obligated to tell you this property is structurally unsound. The previous owner died 8 months ago. No one's been up there since. That's fine,
She wasn't
Jake
guarding
had said.
a house. She
There's
was
no
guarding
water,
life
no
itself.
power. I said that's fine. She'd studied him for a long moment. Men who bought property the way other people bought bullets. All right then. She slid the deed across the desk. Now Jake stood at the base of a mountain that didn't have a name on any map, staring at a dirt path that might have been a road once. His truck died halfway up. Jake didn't bother trying to restart it. He grabbed his rucksack and started walking. The rucksack held everything he owned, now 3 changes of clothes, a sleeping bag, his discharge papers, and a Colt 45 he'd promised himself he wouldn't use. Not on anyone else anyway. His boots found the rhythm without him thinking about it. Left, right, left, right. The shack appeared so suddenly, he almost walked past it. Half collapsed, leaning, barely standing. Jake dropped his rucksack. Perfect, he said to no one. He took 1 step toward the door. That's when he saw her. The German Shepherd was sitting at the base of the porch steps, directly in his path. Not cowering, not growling. Just there. Jake stopped. The dog stared at him with eyes that were too intelligent. Her coat was scarred, a long white mark across her shoulder, another across her muzzle. She wasn't skinny, but she wasn't moving either. "Hey, girl," Jake said quietly, dropping into the tone he'd used with K9 units in Kabul. "I'm not here to hurt you." The dog didn't react. Jake reached for his rucksack, moving careful. He pulled out a protein bar, unwrapped. It broke off half. He tossed it toward the dog. The protein bar landed 2 feet from her nose. She didn't even look at it. "Okay," Jake said. "You're not food motivated." He tried to move around her. The moment his boot touched the first step, the dog stood. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just stood. And somehow that was louder than any sound she could have made. Jake froze. They stared at each other. "I bought this place," Jake said. "It's mine now. I've got the deed and everything." The dog's expression didn't change. "Look, I don't want trouble. I just need somewhere to—" He stopped. "Somewhere to what? Disappear. Die quietly." The dog took 1 step forward. Jake's hand moved toward the 45, then stopped. He'd done a lot of things he wasn't proud of, but shooting a dog for existing wasn't going to be one of them. "All right," he said quietly. "All right, you win. I'll sit here. We'll figure this out." He sat down on the ground, slowly keeping his hands visible. The dog watched every movement. They stayed like that for an hour. What Jake didn't know yet was that this standoff was a test he needed to pass. The sun moved. Jake's legs went numb. He was 34 years old and felt 60. The dog finally moved. She walked around the side of the shack and disappeared. Jake waited 5 more minutes, then slowly stood. His knees popped. He approached the porch again, testing. The dog didn't reappear. He made it to the door and pushed it open. And in the corner, in a nest made from an old military jacket, were 3 puppies. Jake's breath caught. The puppies were tiny, maybe 3 weeks old. They squirmed over each other, making small noises. "Oh," Jake said softly. "That's why." He heard the click of nails on wood behind him. The mother dog was standing in the doorway. Her body language had completely changed. Before she'd been stone. Now she was coiled steel. Jake raised his hands and backed away from the puppies. "I get it," he said. "I get it. They're yours. I'm not going to hurt them." The dog moved between him and her pups, never taking her eyes off him. Jake backed all the way out and sat down on the edge of the porch, leaving the doorway clear. The dog watched him for a long moment, then turned and went to her puppies. He heard small whining sounds, then silence as they nursed. Jake put his head in his hands. He'd bought a $5 shack to disappear in, and instead, he'd found something that needed him to stay alive. "Damn it," he whispered. What Jake didn't realize was that staying alive was exactly what Samuel Trent had planned for. He couldn't leave now. Couldn't do that because 3 tiny puppies and their mother had decided this death trap was home, and if he left, they might not survive the next cold snap. "All right," he said to the empty air. "New plan." He spent the next hour inventorying what he had. 1 rucksack, 1 handgun, 1 truck that might not start again, $40 in cash, no food except protein bars, no water except what he could find. He'd survived on less in Helmand Province. He walked back down the mountain as the sun set, found his truck, and by some miracle got it started. He drove it as far up the path as it would go, then killed the engine. By the time he hiked back to the shack, it was full dark. The mother dog was sitting on the porch again. "I'm back," Jake said quietly. "Just so you know, I'm going to sleep out here, not inside. You and your pups can have the interior." He spread his sleeping bag on the porch far from the door. The dog watched but didn't move. Jake lay down and stared up at stars he'd forgotten existed. His last thought before exhaustion dragged him under was that he hadn't counted the days. He'd have to start over tomorrow. Jake woke to something breathing near his face. His hand went to the .45 before his eyes were fully open, but he didn't draw. The mother dog was standing over him close enough that he could feel her breath. They stared at each other in the gray pre-dawn light. Then the dog turned and walked back to the doorway, pausing once to look at him over her shoulder. "Is that an invitation?" Jake asked hoarsely. The dog went inside. Jake sat up slowly. Every muscle in his back screamed. He rolled up his sleeping bag and approached the doorway. The dog was lying with her puppies nursing them. She glanced at him as he entered, but didn't tense. Progress. Jake spent the morning making the structure safer. He couldn't fix it, not without materials he didn't have, but he could make it less likely to kill them. He grabbed a loose board. "All right, girl, let's make this place survivable." The dog watched from her corner as he worked. Every few minutes, she'd huff, not aggressive, more like checking he was still there. "I hear you," Jake said, prying another board free. "I'm not going anywhere." He covered the biggest holes in the floor with boards he ripped from the outer walls. The dog's ears tracked every movement. "You don't trust Easy, do you?" Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, me neither." By noon, Jake was out of water. The puppies were whining. The mother dog kept looking toward the door, then back at Jake. "I know," he told her. "I'm working on it." He grabbed an empty bottle and went outside, following the sound of running water. It took him 20 minutes before he found the creek. Ice cold and clear. He filled his canteen, dropped in a purification tablet, and brought it back. The dog stood immediately when he entered with the water. "It's okay," Jake said. "Look." He poured some water into his cupped palm and held it out to her. The dog approached, slowly, sniffed, then lapped at the water in his hand. Her tongue was rough and warm. When she finished, Jake poured more water into his palm, then carefully set the canteen down near her nest. The dog looked at the canteen, then at Jake, then back at the canteen. Then she did something that made Jake's chest tighten. She wagged her tail. Just once. Just the smallest movement. "You're welcome," Jake said quietly. What he didn't know was that simple act of trust would be the thing that kept him human. That night, the dog didn't make him sleep on the porch. She moved her puppies to the far corner and watched as Jake laid out his sleeping bag near the door. When he lay down, she settled with her pups, keeping one eye on him until darkness swallowed everything. Jake listened to the sound of her breathing and realized he was crying. He hadn't cried at the funeral, hadn't cried during the divorce papers, hadn't cried through any of it. But he was crying now in a falling down shack on a mountain no one cared about because a dog had wagged her tail once. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the darkness, to his wife, to his son, to everyone he'd failed. "I'm so sorry." The dog huffed softly in response. And somehow, that was enough. Day 3 started with gunfire in the distance. Jake's eyes snapped open. His hand found the .45 before his brain fully engaged. The dog was already at the door, alert, every muscle tense. "Easy," Jake whispered. "Hunters, probably." But the gunfire was too regular, too controlled. Jake moved to the window and looked out. Nothing visible through the trees. But the shots continued. Pop, 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 like someone running drills. The dog growled low in her throat. "Yeah," Jake said. "I don't like it either." The shooting stopped after 10 minutes. Jake waited another 20 before he moved. "Stay," he told the dog. "Guard the pups." He grabbed his .45 and went outside, moving quiet through the trees, toward where the shots had come from. He found the site half a mile away. Shell casings, fresh boot prints, tire tracks from an ATV, and surveying equipment, transit, GPS marker, flags with Kelworth Security printed on them. Jake's jaw tightened. Someone was already here, already working. He pulled out one of the flags and stuffed it in his jacket, then made his way back to the shack. The dog met him at the door. "We've got company," Jake told her, "or we will soon." That evening, Jake found the box. He'd been reinforcing the porch when his boot went through a rotted board. He cursed, pulled his foot out, and something caught his eye in the hole. Cedar, sealed with wax. Jake's pulse picked up. He knew that technique, he'd used it himself in Afghanistan. He carefully widened the hole and pulled out a cedar box. The wax seal was intact. There were words burned into the lid. "For J. Mercer, when you arrive." Jake's hands started shaking. He carried the box inside. The dog immediately stood, reading the change in his body language. "It's okay," Jake said. But his voice didn't sound okay. He sat down and stared at the box for a long time. Then, he broke the seal and opened it. Inside were a letter, 3 photographs, hand-drawn maps, dog tags, and a USB drive wrapped in plastic. Jake picked up the letter with fingers that felt numb. "Jake, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and you're standing in what's left of my home. I'm sorry it came to this. You don't know me, but I knew your father. Daniel Mercer." Danny, to those of us who served with him in the 75th Ranger Regiment. He saved my life in Kandahar in '03. Took 2 rounds meant for me. Jake's vision blurred. His father had died by suicide in 2019. Jake had been deployed when it happened. I tried to stay in touch after we got out. Your father didn't make it easy. Men like us, we don't know how to come home. Not really. When I heard he'd died, when I heard how he'd died, I understood. Some wars don't end just because you leave the battlefield. Jake's throat felt like it was closing. I bought this land in 2008. What I found here needed protecting. Beneath this mountain is a rare earth mineral deposit. The kind that makes phones work, makes missiles fly, makes fortunes. A company called Kelworth Security found out about it in 2015. I've spent the last 8 years keeping them off this ridge by any means necessary. The dog you've met, her name is Rya. She was my K9 partner for 3 years before I retired. She's 8 years old now, trained in protection and detection. When I got sick, I trained her for one last mission: guard this place until someone I trusted arrived. I told her to wait for a Mercer. She's been waiting for you, Jake. Jake looked up. The dog Rya was staring at him. "You've been waiting," he said hoarsely. "This whole time." Rya's tail moved once. The maps show the deposit locations. The USB drive has everything I collected on Kelworth: illegal surveys, payoffs, threats. I couldn't go public with it. I'm an old man with a record. They'd bury it in me. But you're Danny Mercer's son. You're a Marine. You're someone people might actually listen to. I'm asking you to finish what I started. Protect this mountain. I'm sorry I couldn't leave you something better than a falling down shack and an impossible task. But I think maybe you needed the impossible right now. Samuel Trent, Former Sergeant 75th Ranger Regiment, 2024. The date was 8 months ago. Jake set the letter down like it might disintegrate. He looked at the photographs. One showed a young man in ranger fatigues standing with another man Jake recognized. His father. Both grinning, young, unbroken. The second photo showed Rya in tactical gear, alert and focused. The third showed this shack but whole, painted, with a garden, and Trent older sitting on the porch with Rya at his feet. Jake picked up the dog tags. Samuel Trent, Sergeant U.S. Army. He picked up the USB drive. And he understood. This wasn't random. This was orchestrated. Trent had left him the property, had made sure it would go to a Mercer, had trained his dog to wait. Jake looked at Rya. You knew. This whole time you knew I was coming. Rya stood and walked over to him. She sat down directly in front of him, formal and precise, and offered her paw. Jake took it. Her paw was warm and scarred and steady. Okay, Jake said, and his voice broke. Okay, I'll do it. I don't know how yet, but I'll do it. Rya's tail wagged, really wagged this time, full and certain. One of the puppies whined from the corner. Rya immediately turned and went back to them. But she kept looking at Jake. Not suspicion. Assessment. She'd been deciding if he was worthy. Apparently he'd passed. But passing Rya's test was only the beginning. Jake spent the next hour going through the maps. Trent's handwriting marked at least 15 different sites across the mountain, each labeled with coordinates and depth estimates. The deposit was massive, easily millions in value, and Kelworth Security wanted every ounce of it. The USB drive would have to wait. Jake didn't have a laptop, didn't have power. But he understood now why this place mattered, why Rya mattered, why he mattered. He was still studying the maps when Rya suddenly stood alert, her whole body language changing. Jake's hand went to his .45. What is it? Rya was staring at the door, ears forward, every muscle tense. Then Jake heard it too. Vehicles. Coming up the mountain. Multiple vehicles. Jake moved to the window and looked out. 3 black SUVs were navigating the path, moving with confidence. Kelworth, Jake breathed. Rya growled the first real sound he'd heard her make. Low and sustained and promising violence. Easy, Jake said, mind already moving through scenarios. We're going to be smart about this. The SUVs stopped about 50 yards from the shack. Jake counted 6 men climbing out, all dressed in corporate casual uniform. Khakis and polo shirts and weapons they weren't bothering to hide. One of them had a briefcase. They approached as a unit, tactical but trying to look friendly. Jake stepped out onto the porch, Rya at his heel. She wasn't growling anymore, but Jake could feel the tension radiating off her. The man with the briefcase stopped at the base of the porch, keeping his hands visible, but his smile aggressive. Mid-40s. Expensive haircut. Expensive watch. Mr. Mercer. His voice was warm as antifreeze. I'm Curtis Hammond, Senior Acquisition Specialist with Kelworth Land Development. Welcome to your new property. Thanks, Jake said flatly. Now leave. Hammond's smile didn't waver. I understand you purchased this parcel at auction last week. Congratulations. However, I'm here to save you a lot of future headaches. Kelworth is prepared to offer you $50,000 cash today for a quit-claim deed. Not interested. Mr. Mercer, I don't think you understand the situation. This property is landlocked, structurally unsound, and sits on unstable geology. Then you shouldn't want it either. Hammond's smile went sharp. Let me be direct. We know what Samuel Trent was doing up here. We know what he left behind. And we know you're Danny Mercer's son, a Marine with a service record that includes 2 Purple Hearts and a dishonorable discharge for assaulting a superior officer. Jake's jaw tightened. The dishonorable discharge was a lie, but it was a lie that had followed him everywhere. We know you're living in your truck, Hammond continued. We know you haven't spoken to your ex-wife in 2 years. We know you bought this place because you have nowhere else to go. I'm not judging, I'm offering you a way out. $50,000 can buy you time to rebuild your life. No. 100,000. No. Hammond's smile died. Mr. Mercer Kelworth has invested significant capital in surveying this region. We have mineral rights pending with the state. This mountain represents a critical strategic resource. Are you really going to stand in the way of national security for pride? Is that what you're calling it now? Jake's voice was dangerously quiet. National security. 200,000. Final offer. Get off my land. Hammond stared at him for a long moment. Then he set the briefcase down, opened it, and pulled out a thick envelope. He tossed it onto the porch. That's our standard contract and a check. It's good for 72 hours. After that, this gets significantly more complicated for you. Is that a threat? It's reality. This mountain is being developed with or without your cooperation. You can profit from that, or you can become an obstacle. Men who become obstacles tend to have unfortunate accidents in places this remote. Rya's growl started again, low and continuous. Hammond looked at the dog and took an involuntary step back. That animal should be on a leash. She doesn't need one, Jake said. She knows who belongs here. Hammond smiled, but there was no warmth in it now. 72 hours, Mr. Mercer. Make the smart choice. He turned and walked back to the SUVs with his team. They drove away, engines roaring, kicking up dirt and rocks. Jake waited until the sound faded completely. Then he picked up the envelope, opened it, and looked at the check. $200,000. Enough to rebuild his life. Enough to disappear properly. Enough to never worry about sleeping in his truck again. He looked at Rya. She was staring at him with an intensity that made something in his chest hurt. I know, he said. I know what I said. He walked to the edge of the porch and ripped the check in half, then quarters, then smaller, until the pieces were confetti in the mountain wind. We're not done yet, he told Rya. Not even close. Rya's tail wagged once hard. Then she walked back inside to her puppies. And Jake understood she'd been testing him too. Somehow, impossibly, he'd passed again. But what Jake didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that Hammond's 72-hour deadline wasn't a negotiation tactic. It was a countdown to something much worse. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He lay in his sleeping bag listening to Rya breathe, listening to the puppies make small sounds, and thought about his father. Danny Mercer had come home from Afghanistan with a purple heart and nightmares he never talked about. Jake had been 16, old enough to notice the way his father flinched at loud noises, old enough to hear him pacing at 3 a.m., old enough to know something was broken that couldn't be fixed. His father had lasted 14 years after coming home. Jake had lasted 6. What am I doing here, Dad? Jake whispered into the darkness. Rya huffed in her sleep. Jake closed his eyes and tried to remember the last conversation he'd had with his father. Really had not just surface-level how's the weather bullshit. He couldn't. I'm sorry, Jake said again. I'm sorry I wasn't there. The wind moved through the trees outside, and for just a moment, Jake could almost imagine it was his father's voice saying what he'd always said when Jake apologized for things that weren't his fault. Stop apologizing and start fixing it. Jake opened his eyes. Yeah, he said to the darkness. Yeah, okay. He sat up and pulled out the maps again, studying them by moonlight coming through the holes in the roof. 15 deposit sites, all marked, all documented, and a USB drive full of evidence. Jake needed to see what was on that drive, which meant he needed to get to town, find a library, find a computer. Rya, Jake said quietly. The dog's head came up immediately alert. I need to go somewhere tomorrow, just for a few hours. Can you hold down the fort? Rya stared at him for a long moment, then stood, walked over, and put her head on his knee. Jake rested his hand on her head. Yeah, he said. We're a team now, aren't we? Rya's tail wagged once. Jake didn't sleep after that. He kept thinking about the way Hammond had looked at him, the way he'd said unfortunate accidents. Men like Hammond didn't make empty threats, which meant Jake had 72 hours, now closer to 60, before things got violent. He'd been in worse situations. Helmand Province, Fallujah, places where the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. But this was different. This time, he wasn't fighting for someone else's war. This time, it was personal. When dawn finally came, Jake packed the USB drive in his jacket pocket, made sure Rya had water, and headed down the mountain to his truck. The Silverado started on the third try. Jake drove down the mountain and into the nearest town, a place called Coopersville, that looked like it had peaked in 1987 and been declining ever since. Main Street had more empty storefronts than occupied ones. The library was in an old brick building that smelled like mildew and coffee. Jake walked in and approached the front desk. The librarian was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain and eyes that had seen everything. "Help you?" she asked. "I need to use a computer." "Library card?" "I don't have one." "You a resident of the county?" "I just moved here." She studied him for a long moment, taking in the military bearing, the haunted eyes, the fact that he looked like he'd been sleeping rough. "You bought old Trent's place, didn't you?" Jake's hand instinctively moved toward his jacket pocket, where the .45 was hidden. "How did you—" "Small town honey. Word travels, especially when a Marine buys a condemned property for $5. She pushed a guest pass across the desk. "Computers are in the back. 1 hour limit. Don't download anything illegal." "Thank you." "And son?" She waited until he looked at her. "Sam Trent was a good man. Whatever he left you, it's worth protecting." Jake nodded and headed to the computer bank in the back. He plugged in the USB drive with hands that weren't quite steady. The drive opened. Dozens of folders. Hundreds of files. Jake started reading. What he found made his blood run cold. Kelworth Security wasn't just a mining company. They were a private military contractor with ties to 3 senators, 2 defense contractors, and a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. The rare earth deposits under Jake's Mountain were worth an estimated $2.4 billion. And Kelworth had already secured provisional rights through backroom deals with state officials, deals that completely bypassed environmental review, public comment, and about 15 different laws. Trent had documented everything. Photos of illegal surveys, copies of forged permits, email chains discussing management of local resistance, and in one folder labeled Threats, Jake found photos of Trent's cabin, with Trent in them, crosshairs digitally added over his face. "Jesus Christ," Jake whispered. "You okay back there?" the librarian called. "Yeah," Jake said, but he wasn't. He kept reading. The last file Trent had added was dated 3 days before he died. A single paragraph. "They've escalated. 2 men came to the property today with an offer I couldn't refuse. I refused anyway. They said accidents happen to old men living alone. I've updated my will. Everything goes to Danny Mercer's son. Jake, I've never met him, but if he's anything like his father, he'll finish this. I'm sorry, kid. I wish I had more time." Jake's vision blurred. Trent had known they were going to kill him, and he'd done it anyway, had left everything to a man he'd never met, gambling that blood and honor would be enough. Jake copied everything to a second USB drive the librarian let him buy for $10. Then he deleted his browsing history, cleared the cache, and logged out. He was halfway to the door when the librarian called out. "Son." Jake turned. "You look like you're about to do something stupid." "Maybe." "Sam tried to fight them alone. Look where that got him." She wrote something on a piece of paper and handed it to him. "That's my nephew's number. He's a reporter for the Charleston Gazette, investigative type. Won awards and everything. You need someone who can make noise, he's your man." Jake looked at the number, then at her. "Why are you helping me?" "Because Sam Trent used to bring me tomatoes from his garden every summer. Because Kelworth is a cancer that's been eating this region for 20 years. And because you've got the look of a man who's done running." She smiled sadly. "Go make some noise, Marine." Jake pocketed the number. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You got a long fight ahead of you." Jake walked out of the library and stood on the street breathing hard. A long fight ahead. Yeah, he did. But for the first time in 3 years, Jake felt something other than empty. He felt angry, and anger he knew how to use. He was halfway back to his truck when he noticed the SUV. Black. Tinted windows. Parked across the street. Watching. Jake kept walking casual, but his hand moved to the .45 under his jacket. The SUV didn't move. Jake got in his truck, started the engine, and pulled out. The SUV followed. "Of course," Jake muttered. He drove out of town, taking the long way back to the mountain, watching his mirrors. The SUV stayed 3 cars back. Professional tail. Jake's mind raced through options. He couldn't lead them back to the shack. Couldn't lead them to Rya and the puppies. Which meant he had to lose them. Or deal with them. Jake took a turn onto a side road barely more than a dirt track and accelerated. The Silverado bounced and rattled, but it held together. The SUV followed closer now. Jake pushed the truck harder, kicking up dust, taking corners too fast. The road climbed narrow and winding. Perfect. Jake knew these mountains now, had spent 3 days memorizing every path, every trail. The SUV didn't. He took a sharp right onto an even narrower trail, one he'd scouted yesterday, and accelerated. The trail ended at a washout that required serious 4-wheel drive to cross. Jake's Silverado barely made it. The SUV tried. Jake watched in his rear-view mirror as the black vehicle hit the washout too fast, bottomed out, and got stuck. He kept driving. 2 men climbed out of the SUV, cursing, pulling out phones. Jake smiled grimly. "Amateurs," he said. He took the long way back to the shack, making sure no one was following, doubling back twice to check. By the time he parked his truck and hiked up to the shack, it was late afternoon. Rya met him at the door, tail wagging. "Miss me?" Jake asked. Rya huffed and headbutted his hand. "Yeah, I missed you too." Jake went inside, checked the puppies. They were fine, growing, getting stronger, and sat down with the maps and the USB drive. He had 60 hours left on Hammond's deadline, and now he had evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could end careers and start investigations. He also had a reporter's number in his pocket. Jake pulled out his phone, an old burner he'd bought at a gas station, and stared at the number. 1 call. That's all it would take. 1 call, and this would become real. Become public. Become a fight he couldn't walk away from. His finger hovered over the dial button. Rya walked over and sat down in front of him, staring with those 2 intelligent eyes. "What do you think?" Jake asked her. "You think I should do it?" Rya tilted her head, then reached out with 1 paw and deliberately pushed Jake's hand. The phone dialed. Jake stared at her. "Did you just—" The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." A man's voice, young, suspicious. "Is this Marcus Webb?" Jake asked. "Who's asking?" "My name is Jake Mercer. Your aunt at the Coopersville Library gave me your number. I have a story for you. A big one." Silence on the other end. Then, how big? $2.4 billion big. Corporate corruption, illegal mining, murder. And I have evidence. Another pause. "Where are you?" "I can't tell you that yet, but I can send you files, proof. Everything you need to start digging." "Why me?" "Because your aunt says you're the kind of reporter who actually gives a damn." "She would say that." Marcus let out a breath. "All right, send me what you've got. I'll look at it. But if this is bullshit—" "It's not bullshit," Jake said quietly. "A good man died protecting this information. I'm not going to let that be for nothing." Okay. Send it to this email." Marcus rattled off an encrypted email address. Jake wrote it down. "I'll send it tonight," Jake said. "How long before you can verify it?" "If it's as good as you say, 48 hours, maybe less. But Jake, Marcus's voice got serious. If you're going up against who I think you're going up against, you need to be careful. These people don't play fair. Neither do I, Jake said and hung up. He looked at Rya. Well, we did it. No going back now. Rya's tail wagged. You're way too comfortable with this level of danger, you know that. Rya just stared at him, and Jake could have sworn she was smiling. That night, Jake used the library's guest Wi-Fi password still active on his phone to upload everything from the USB drive to Marcus's email. Then he destroyed the USB drive, smashed it, burned it in the wood stove. The original documents were still in the cedar box hidden under the floorboards. Insurance. Jake lay in his sleeping bag, staring up at the stars through the holes in the roof, and thought about his father, about Trent, about what it meant to fight for something that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Holy shit. This is real. I'm on it. Jake smiled in the darkness. We're on it, he corrected quietly. Rya huffed in agreement. Jake closed his eyes. 48 hours until Marcus could publish. Less than that until Hammond's deadline expired. Things were about to get very, very bad. But for the first time in 3 years, Jake felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Jake woke to the sound of Rya growling. Not the warning growl, the combat growl. He had the .45 in his hand before his eyes were fully open, rolling out of his sleeping bag in one motion. What is it? Rya was at the window, hackles raised, staring into the darkness outside. Her body was coiled tight, ready to explode into violence. Jake moved to the window, staying low. At first he saw nothing, just darkness and trees, and there, a light, moving through the forest. Then another, and another. Flashlights, at least 4 of them, coming up the mountain. Jake checked his phone. 2:47 a.m. Hammond's deadline wasn't up for another 36 hours. They'd come early. Smart, Jake muttered. Hit us when we're sleeping. Very smart. He grabbed his rucksack, started stuffing essentials inside. The cedar box, the maps, his spare ammunition, the burner phone. Rya watched him, understanding immediately. She went to her puppies and started nudging them awake with her nose. The puppies whined, confused. I know, girl, Jake said quietly. I know, but we have to move. Now. The lights were getting closer. Jake could hear voices now, low and professional. Not amateurs. Not security guards playing soldier. These were contractors. Real ones. Jake moved to the door, peered out. The lights were spreading out, forming a perimeter. Classic approach pattern. They were going to surround the shack, then move in. Standard room clearing tactics. Jake had used them 100 times in Iraq, which meant he knew exactly how to counter them. Rya, he said quietly, can the puppies walk? Rya looked at her pups. The biggest one, a male with a dark mask, stumbled to his feet, wobbling but mobile. The other 2 were smaller, weaker, not good. Jake made a decision. He grabbed the old military jacket from Rya's nest, bundled the 2 smaller puppies inside, and tied it across his chest like a sling. They squirmed and whined. Shh, Jake whispered. Shh, I've got you. The bigger puppy looked up at Jake, with eyes that were starting to focus. You can walk, Jake told him. Stay with your mother. Understand? The puppy tilted his head. Rya nudged the puppy, then looked at Jake and gave one short bark. Roger that. Jake grabbed his .45 with his right hand, his rucksack with his left, and moved to the back of the shack where there used to be a window before the frame rotted away. He could hear boots now, close, maybe 20 yards out. A voice carried through the trees. Thermals picking up 1 adult, 1 dog, possible smaller heat signatures. Another voice. Hammond wants the Marine alive if possible. The dog's expendable. So are the puppies. Jake's jaw clenched. Over my dead body. He climbed through the window opening, moving quiet, and dropped to the ground outside. Rya followed with the puppy in her mouth, carrying him by the scruff the way mother dogs do. She set him down, and he immediately pressed against her leg, terrified, but trying to be brave. Jake knew that feeling. They moved into the forest, Jake leading Rya and the puppy following. The puppies in Jake's jacket squirmed against his chest, warm and fragile. Behind them, Jake heard the contractors breach the shack, flashlights, shouting, "Clear, nothing here." He ran, "Find him. Dogs will track him, get them up here." Dogs. Of course they'd bring dogs. Jake moved faster, picking his way through the darkness with the same skills that had kept him alive in Helmand. Avoid branches. Step on rocks, not leaves. Move with purpose, but not panic. Rya stayed at his heel, the puppy struggling to keep up on legs that barely worked. They made it maybe 300 yards before Jake heard barking behind them. Not just barking. Tracking barking. The contractors had bloodhounds. "Damn it," Jake whispered. He couldn't outrun tracking dogs, not with 2 puppies strapped to his chest and a third that could barely walk. Not with Rya having to stay slow for her pup, which meant he had to change the game. Jake stopped at a creek, the same one he'd been getting water from. He waded in ice-cold water soaking through his boots. "Rya, in, now." Rya picked up her puppy and jumped into the creek. The puppy yelped at the cold water, but Rya kept moving, following Jake upstream. Water would break the scent trail. Not forever, but long enough. They stayed in the creek for almost a quarter mile, Jake's feet going numb, the puppies shivering against his chest. Finally, he climbed out on the far bank and kept moving. The barking behind them continued, but it was confused now. The dogs had lost the trail. Jake allowed himself one moment of relief. Then he heard the drone, a high-pitched whine, mechanical and cold. Jake looked up and saw it against the stars, a small quadcopter with a thermal camera mounted underneath. "You've got to be kidding me," Jake said. They had drones. Of course they had drones. Jake looked at Rya. "We need cover. Heavy cover." But there was no heavy cover. Not here. Just trees and rocks and the mine shaft. Jake had seen it 2 days ago while exploring. An old coal mine, probably from the 1920s entrance, half collapsed, but still passable. Trent had marked it on one of the maps with a note, "Emergency shelter, unstable." Unstable was better than dead. Jake changed direction, moving toward where he remembered the mine entrance being. The drone followed its camera fixed on them. A voice crackled from somewhere behind them, amplified by a megaphone. "Mr. Mercer, there's nowhere to go. Make this easy on yourself." Jake didn't respond. Didn't slow down. Rya stayed with him, the puppy in her mouth, making small, distressed sounds. The mine entrance appeared out of the darkness, a black hole in the hillside, timber supports rotting and dangerous looking. Jake didn't hesitate. He ducked inside. The darkness swallowed them whole. Jake kept moving deeper, one hand on the wall, feeling his way. The air smelled like rot and minerals, and things that had been dead a long time. Water dripped somewhere. The ceiling was low. Jake had to duck to avoid hitting his head on support beams that creaked ominously. Behind them, light appeared at the entrance. Flashlights. "He went into the mine," someone shouted. "Do we follow?" Hammond said, alive. Another voice responded. "That mine's been condemned for 80 years, probably collapse the second we walk in there." "So what do? We wait. He's got to come out eventually." Jake kept moving deeper into the mine, putting distance between them and the entrance. Finally, when he couldn't see any light from outside anymore, he stopped. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight function, keeping it dim. They were in what looked like a main shaft. Rails for mine carts ran along the floor, rusted and broken. Support timbers every few feet, many of them cracked or sagging. Side tunnels branched off in multiple directions. Rya set down her puppy and shook herself, spraying water everywhere. The puppy immediately stumbled over to Jake and pressed against his leg, shaking. Jake untied the jacket sling and carefully extracted the 2 smaller puppies. They were soaked and shivering, but alive. "Okay," Jake said quietly. "Okay. We're okay. We're alive. For now." But Jake wasn't stupid. They were trapped in an unstable mine with one exit that was currently being watched by armed contractors with thermal drones and tracking dogs. And he had 3 puppies who needed warmth and food and their mother. And Rya was staring at him with eyes that said, "What's the plan?" Marine good question. Jake sat down on the cold stone floor, his back against the wall, and tried to think. The puppies immediately piled against him, seeking warmth. Rya sat down facing the entrance on guard. Jake's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, surprised he even had signal down here. 1 bar. Barely. A text from Marcus Story ready. Publishing in 6 hours. "You okay?" Jake typed back with numb fingers. "Trapped in old mine. Armed contractors outside. Need help." The response came fast. Location. Jake pulled up his GPS coordinates and sent them. "Marcus calling state police now." "Hold tight." Jake almost laughed. "Hold tight. Sure. In a condemned mine that might collapse any second, with 3 infant puppies. While armed mercenaries waited outside to kill him. Easy." He looked at Rya. "Your boss left me a hell of a job, you know that." Rya's tail thumped once against the stone floor. Yeah, you like me anyway." One of the smaller puppies, a female with a white chest patch, started whimpering. Hungry. They were always hungry at this age. "I know, sweetheart," Jake said softly. "I know. Just hold on a little longer." The puppy kept whimpering. Rya moved closer, lay down, and the puppies immediately latched on to nurse. Rya looked exhausted, but she didn't complain. Jake watched them and felt something crack open in his chest. These puppies. This dog. This impossible situation. 3 years ago he'd had a family. A wife who smiled at him like he was worth something. A son who thought his dad was a hero. Then his son had died 6 years old, struck by a drunk driver while riding his bike in front of their house. Jake had been deployed, hadn't been there, hadn't been able to protect him. His wife had needed him to grieve with her, to be present, to be something other than stone. Jake hadn't known how. He'd come home from his deployment and just stopped. Stopped feeling, stopped talking, stopped being human. The divorce papers had come 6 months later. Jake hadn't fought them, and now here he was in a mine shaft with 3 puppies who needed him to be present, to be human, to be something other than the ghost he'd become. "I don't know how to do this," Jake whispered to Rya. "I don't know how to be what you need." Rya looked up at him, while her puppies nursed, and her expression was so clear it might as well have been words. "Figure it out." Jake let out a shaky breath. "Okay," he said. "Okay." His phone buzzed again. "Marcus State Police say they're 45 minutes out. Can you hold that long?" Jake looked at the entrance, thinking about the contractors outside. He typed back, "I'll try. But if you don't hear from me, make sure the story runs. Promise me. Marcus. I promise. Stay alive, Jake." Jake pocketed his phone. 45 minutes. He could hold 45 minutes, probably. He checked his 45. Full magazine plus 1 in the chamber. 14 rounds total. He had 1 spare magazine in his jacket pocket. 28 rounds, against at least 6 contractors with automatic weapons. The math wasn't good. But Jake had survived worse odds in Fallujah. He'd held a position for 3 hours with 4 other Marines against an enemy force that should have overrun them. He'd made it out. This was just another day ending in Y. Except this time he had 3 puppies and their mother to protect. No pressure. Time crawled. Jake sat in the darkness listening to the puppy's nurse, listening to water drip, listening to his own heartbeat. At some point he wasn't sure how long, maybe 20 minutes, he heard voices from the entrance. "How long are we waiting?" "As long as it takes. Hammond's orders." "This is ridiculous. We should just smoke him out." "With what? You want to start a fire in a mine shaft? Brilliant plan, genius." "I'm just saying." You're just saying, shut up and do your job. Silence. Jake smiled grimly. Dissension in the ranks. Always a good sign. His phone buzzed. He checked it. Marcus Police delayed. Road washout. 90 minutes now. I'm sorry. Jake closed his eyes. 90 minutes. He could hold 90 minutes. Maybe. Another text came through, this time from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Mercer. This is Curtis Hammond. I know you're reading this. Let's talk like adults. Jake stared at the message. Another text. I'm not an unreasonable man. You've made your point. You're tough. You're resourceful. I respect that. But this doesn't have to end badly. Walk out of that mine. We'll talk. Nobody gets hurt. Jake's finger hovered over the keyboard. Another text. I know about the reporter. Marcus Webb. Charleston Gazette. Clever. But my people are already working on that. The story won't run. I promise you that. So what's your play here? Die in a collapsed mine. For what? Jake typed back. For the same thing your people killed Samuel Trent for. The truth. The response came fast. Samuel Trent died of a heart attack. Natural causes. That's what the death certificate says. Jake. Because you paid the coroner. Hammond. You can't prove that. Jake. Actually, I can. Trent documented everything, including the payoff, including the threats, including the photos of your contractors surveilling his property. It's all going public. The only question is whether you're there to see it. A long pause. Then, you're bluffing. Jake. Try me. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, last chance Marine. Walk out. Take your money. Disappear. Or my men come in there and drag you out. And accidents happen in unstable mines. Do you understand me? Jake understood perfectly. He typed, "Come get me." He turned off his phone to save battery. Rya had finished nursing. The puppies were asleep in a pile against her side, full and warm and oblivious to the danger. Jake checked his .45 again. Still 14 rounds. Still bad math. He looked at Rya. "When I tell you to run," Jake said quietly, "you run. You take your puppies and you go deep into this mine. There are side tunnels. Pick one. Go as far as you can. Don't stop until I come get you. Understand?" Rya stared at him. "I mean it," Jake said. "I'm not letting them hurt you or your pups. So when I say run, you run." Rya's expression didn't change. "That's an order, soldier." Rya's tail thumped once. "Roger that." Jake moved toward the entrance, staying in the shadows, using the support beams as cover. He could see the contractor's flashlights now, maybe 30 feet away, just outside the mine opening. He counted 4 lights, which meant at least 2 more were somewhere he couldn't see. Jake's military training kicked in automatic as breathing. Assess the terrain, identify cover, calculate angles of fire, plan your retreat. The mine shaft was narrow, maybe 8 feet wide. That was good. Limited their ability to spread out, made automatic weapons less effective. The support beams were decent cover if they didn't collapse. Big if. Jake positioned himself behind one of the thicker beams, .45 raised, and waited. He didn't have to wait long. "All right," a voice said from outside. "We're going in. 2-man teams, suppressed fire only. Hammond wants this quiet." "Roger that." Jake watched as 2 flashlights entered the mine, attached to 2 men in tactical gear. They moved professional, 1 high, 1 low, covering angles, communicating with hand signals. Jake let them get 20 feet inside. Then he shot out their flashlights. The mine shaft exploded with sound, not from Jake's .45, but from the contractor's return fire. Suppressed or not, automatic weapons in an enclosed space were deafening. Rounds sparked off the rock walls. Dust and debris rained down. A support beam near Jake's head splintered. Jake dropped low and moved, staying in the darkness, using the chaos. He fired 3 more shots, not at the contractors, but at the ceiling above them. The rock cracked. Dust poured down. One of the support beams groaned. "Cease fire!" one of the contractors yelled. "Cease fire! The whole damn thing's coming down!" The shooting stopped. Jake moved deeper into the mine, silent as death, and circled around to a side tunnel. He could hear the contractors arguing. "Is he dead?" "I don't know. I can't see anything." "Well, go check." "You go check." "Both of you shut up. Use your thermals." "Thermals aren't working in here. Too much interference from the rock." Perfect. Jake waited in the side tunnel, breathing controlled, weapon ready. One of the contractors advanced, moving careful, sweeping with his weapon. He passed Jake's position. Jake stepped out behind him and pressed the .45 against the base of his skull. "Drop it," Jake whispered. The contractor froze. "I said drop it." The contractor's weapon clattered to the ground. Now the radio. Slow. The contractor reached for his radio with shaking hands and tossed it. "How many of you?" Jake asked. "6. Listen, man, we're just contractors. We don't want to die in here." "Then leave. Hammond will—" "Hammond's not the one with a gun to your head. Walk out. Tell your friends the mine's collapsing. Tell them Mercer's dead. Tell them whatever you want. But leave. Now." The contractor nodded quickly and stumbled back toward the entrance. Jake heard him shouting, "It's coming down! The whole shaft's unstable. We need to pull back. What about Mercer?" "He's buried. Half the ceiling came down. We need to leave before we're buried too." Boot feet running, voices receding. Then silence. Jake waited 5 full minutes before he moved back toward where he'd left Rya and the puppies. They were exactly where he'd left them. Rya was standing now, alert, ready to fight or flee. "It's okay," Jake said quietly. "They're gone. For now." Rya's tail wagged once. Jake sat down and his hands started shaking. Adrenaline dump. He'd forgotten how much he hated that feeling. One of the puppies, the big male, crawled into Jake's lap and looked up at him with eyes that were starting to really see. "Hey, buddy." Jake said, his voice rough. "You doing okay?" The puppy licked his hand. And Jake, who hadn't cried in 3 years except for once, cried for the second time in a week. He cried for his son, for his wife, for Trent, for his father, for every person he'd failed to save. And then he stopped crying and wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Sorry," he told the puppy. "That was unprofessional." The puppy just wagged his tiny tail. Jake's phone buzzed. He checked it. "Marcus stories running in 20 minutes. Every major outlet is picking it up. You're about to be famous." Jake typed back, "I don't want famous. I want Kelworth in prison." "Marcus, working on it. Police are 30 minutes out. Can you hold, Jake? I can hold." He could hold. He'd held worse positions with worse odds. But he was tired. So tired. Rya moved closer and pressed her head against his shoulder. "Thanks," Jake said quietly. They sat like that in the darkness, a man, a dog, and 3 puppies, waiting for dawn. Waiting for justice. Waiting to see if Samuel Trent's gamble on a broken Marine had been worth it. Jake looked at Rya. "Your boss picked a hell of a guy to leave his war to," Jake said. "I'm not even sure I'm worth saving." Rya stared at him with those 2 intelligent eyes. Then she did something that made Jake's throat tighten. She put her paw in his hand, just like she had that first day. Formal. Precise. A promise. "Yeah," Jake whispered. "Yeah, okay. We're in this together." The puppy in his lap yawned and fell asleep. And Jake sat in that mine shaft and waited for the sun to rise. Because that's what Marines do. They hold the line, even when the line is falling apart, even when everything hurts, even when they're not sure they're worth saving. They hold the line, and they don't quit until the mission's complete. Jake's phone buzzed one more time. "Marcus Stories Live." Holy shit, Jake. Every news outlet in the country is running it. Kelworth's stock just dropped 40%. FBI's opening an investigation. You did it. Jake read the message twice. Then he looked at Rya. "We did it," he corrected quietly. Rya's tail wagged, but Jake knew better than to celebrate. Because the story going public meant Hammond was out of time, which meant Hammond was out of options, which meant things were about to get much, much worse. Jake stood up carefully, moving the sleeping puppy to his mother's side. He checked his .45. 9 rounds left. He checked the entrance. Still clear. He checked his phone. 25 minutes until police arrived. 25 minutes to hold. "Rya," Jake said quietly, "I need you to listen very carefully." Rya stood at attention. "If I don't make it out of here," Rya growled. "Listen, if I don't make it, the police will come. They'll find you and the pups. They'll take you somewhere safe. Marcus knows you're here. He'll make sure you're protected. Okay?" Rya kept growling. "I'm serious. You've got 3 babies depending on you. So if things go bad, you run. You save them. That's your mission now. Not protecting this mountain. Not finishing Trent's war. Protecting them. Understand?" Rya stared at him for a long moment. Then she walked over, sat down directly in front of him, and offered her paw. Jake took it. "Good girl," he whispered. "Good girl." That's when he heard the explosion. Not in the mine. Outside. Distant but unmistakable. Jake ran to the entrance and looked out. The forest was on fire. Hammond had decided if he couldn't get Jake out of the mine, he'd smoke him out. And Jake had 25 minutes until the police arrived. 25 minutes to figure out how to survive a forest fire with no exit, and 3 puppies who couldn't walk fast enough to escape. He looked at Rya. "Any ideas?" Rya tilted her head, listening to something Jake couldn't hear yet. Then she barked once and took off running deeper into the mine. "Wait, where are you?" But Rya was already disappearing into the darkness toward one of the side tunnels. Jake grabbed the puppies, all 3 of them, stuffing them back into the jacket sling, and ran after her. "Rya!" She barked again, farther away now. Jake followed the sound, stumbling in the darkness, hitting his head on low-hanging rock, his breath coming in gasps. The tunnel sloped downward. The air got colder, wetter. Rya barked one more time. Jake rounded a corner and stopped. Rya was standing at the edge of an underground pool. Clear water fed by some kind of spring disappearing into a crack in the rock wall. And behind her, daylight. Not much. Just a thin stream of it coming through a gap in the rock. Another exit. "You beautiful, brilliant dog," Jake breathed. He ran to the gap and peered through. It was narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, but it opened onto the far side of the mountain away from the fire. Jake could squeeze through. Probably. Rya definitely could. The puppies certainly could. "Okay," Jake said. "Okay, we're getting out of here. Rya, you first. Show me you can fit." Rya didn't hesitate. She squeezed through the gap, sinuous and quick. Jake followed, pushing the rucksack through first, then turning sideways and forcing himself through the narrow opening. Rock scraped his chest and back. The puppies squirmed against him, making it harder. "Almost there," Jake grunted. "Almost." He popped through the other side and tumbled onto grass. Real grass, real sunlight, real air that didn't smell like smoke and death. Jake lay there for a moment, breathing hard, staring up at the sky. Rya licked his face. "Yeah," Jake said. "I'm okay. We're okay." He sat up and looked around. They were on the eastern side of the mountain, at least a mile from where the contractors had surrounded them. The forest fire was visible as a column of smoke rising from the other side. Jake could hear sirens now. Fire trucks. Police. Marcus had come through. Jake pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from the same number. Marcus. He called back. "Jake, Jesus Christ, I thought you were dead. Are you out?" "I'm out. We're safe. The dog found another exit." "The dog?" "You know what? I'm not even surprised. Where are you?" Jake checked his GPS and read off the coordinates. "Stay there," Marcus said. "Police are coming to you. Do not move. Do not engage with anyone from Kelworth. Just wait. Marcus. You did it, Jake. Hammond's being arrested right now. FBI's got him on racketeering, bribery, conspiracy to commit murder. Kelworth's board is resigning. The mineral rights are being revoked. You won. Jake sat down hard on the grass. Say that again. You won, Marcus repeated. You actually won. Jake looked at Rya. At the puppies now squirming in his lap, hungry and alive and safe. We won, Jake corrected quietly. Because he hadn't done this alone. He'd done it with a dog who'd waited 8 months for him. A dog who'd tested him, trusted him, saved him. A dog who'd shown him what loyalty looked like when you'd forgotten. Jake ended the call and carefully extracted the puppies from the jacket sling. They immediately started crying for food. Rya moved closer and lay down, and the puppies latched on to nurse. Jake watched them and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Actual hope. Not much, not overwhelming, just a small, persistent flame. The kind that maybe, possibly, wouldn't go out. Police cruisers appeared on the dirt road below, lights flashing. Officers climbed out, weapons ready, moving toward Jake's position. Jake raised his hands, keeping them visible. Jake Mercer, one of the officers called out. That's me. Stay where you are. We're coming to you. Jake stayed. Rya stayed. The puppies kept nursing, oblivious to the fact that they'd just survived what should have been impossible. And Jake sat there in the grass on a mountain that had almost killed him with a dog he'd inherited from a dead man he'd never met, and he started laughing. Not crazy laughter, not desperate laughter, just honest laughter, because somehow, against all odds, he'd done it. He'd finished Samuel Trent's war. He'd protected what couldn't protect itself. He'd chosen to stay alive, and that Jake realized was worth something, maybe worth everything. The laughter died in Jake's throat when he saw the second set of vehicles coming up the mountain. Not police cruisers. Black SUVs. 3 of them. The same ones from before. No. Jake breathed. No, no, no. The police officers saw them too. One of them, a sergeant with gray hair and 20 years on his face, immediately raised his radio. Dispatch, we've got unauthorized vehicles approaching our position. Black SUVs, no plates visible. Advise. Static crackled. Copy that, Sergeant Mills. FBI says Kelworth contractors may still be in the area. Use caution. Jake was already moving. He grabbed the puppies, stuffed them back into the jacket sling despite their protests, and looked at Rya. We need to go. Now. Rya was on her feet immediately, hackles raised. Sergeant Mills turned to Jake. Mr. Mercer, stay behind us. We'll handle this. You don't understand, Jake said. These aren't security guards. They're contractors, military contractors, and they just watched their employer get arrested because of me. All the more reason to let us... The SUVs stopped. Doors opened. 6 men climbed out. Not in khakis this time. In full tactical gear, body armor, automatic weapons. And Jake recognized the lead man immediately. The contractor he'd held at gunpoint in the mine. The one he'd let go. Big mistake. Mills keyed his radio again. Dispatch, we need backup. Armed individuals approaching our position. Backup's 15 minutes out, Sarge. 15 minutes. They didn't have 15 minutes. The lead contractor raised his weapon, not pointing it yet, just holding it ready. He called out across the distance. Mercer, you cost us our jobs. You cost us our paychecks. Hammond's in custody, but that doesn't mean this is over. Mills stepped forward, his hand on his sidearm. This is the West Virginia State Police. Drop your weapons and... The contractor fired a burst into the air. The sound echoed across the mountain, sending birds scattering from trees. Mills and the other officers drew their weapons. Drop them now. We're leaving the state in 2 hours, the contractor shouted. But first we're settling accounts, Mercer. You and that dog, that's all we want. Send him over and we walk away. That's not happening, Mills yelled back. Jake's mind raced. 6 contractors with automatic weapons against 3 police officers with pistols. The math was even worse than before. And this time, Jake had 9 rounds left. Maybe 10 if he'd miscounted. Not enough. Sergeant, Jake said quietly. They mean it. They've got nothing to lose now. Hammond's going to prison. Their company's collapsing. They're not walking away from this without blood. Then they're going to have to go through us, Mills said grimly. You'll die. Then I'll die doing my job. Mills glanced at Jake. Get behind the cruiser. Take the dog and those puppies and get down. I'm not hiding while you... That's an order, Marine. Get down. Jake had spent too many years following orders to ignore one now. He moved behind the police cruiser, crouching low. Rya pressed against his side. The standoff stretched. Seconds became minutes. Jake could see the contractors talking amongst themselves, arguing. One of them kept looking at his watch. They were on a timeline. Had to be. Which meant they'd act soon. Jake's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, keeping low. Marcus, FBI's sending a tactical team. ETA 25 minutes. Can you hold? Jake typed back with shaking hands. Contractors here. Armed, outnumbered. Don't know if we can hold. Marcus. Jesus. Okay. I'm tracking your location. Stay alive. Easy for him to say. One of the puppies started whining. The big male. He was trying to crawl out of the jacket sling, probably hungry, definitely uncomfortable. Not now, Jake whispered. Please, buddy, not now. But the puppy kept whining. Louder. Rya looked at Jake, then at her pup, torn between staying alert and comforting her baby. It's okay, Jake told her. Stay focused. I've got him. He adjusted the sling, trying to soothe the puppy with one hand while keeping his .45 ready with the other. That's when the shooting started. Not from the contractors. From somewhere else. Behind them. Higher up the mountain. Jake's head snapped around. Muzzle flashes in the tree line. Someone was shooting at the contractors. The contractors scattered, diving for cover behind their SUVs, returning fire. Mills grabbed his radio. Dispatch, shots fired, multiple shooters. We need that backup now. Jake stared at the tree line, trying to figure out who was shooting. Then he saw him. An old man, had to be in his 70s, with a hunting rifle, firing methodically from behind a tree. Next to him, another man, younger, maybe 50, with a shotgun. Then another person appeared. And another. Locals. Mountain people. At least a dozen of them, forming a loose skirmish line, firing at the contractors. One of them, a woman with gray braids and a face like weathered leather, called out, "Sam Trent was one of ours. You bastards killed him. Now you want to kill the man trying to finish his work. Not on our mountain." The contractors were pinned between the locals and the police. They returned fire, but it was desperate now, uncoordinated. Mills looked as shocked as Jake felt. Who the hell? Trent's people, Jake said, understanding flooding through him. He lived here for 16 years. They're protecting his legacy. The old man with the hunting rifle fired again. One of the contractors went down, grabbing his leg, screaming. "Retreat!" the lead contractor yelled. "Fall back!" They scrambled into their SUVs, engines, roaring tires, spinning on the dirt road as they fled back down the mountain. The locals kept firing until the SUVs disappeared around a bend. Then silence. Mills was breathing hard, weapon still drawn. What the hell just happened? The woman with gray braids emerged from the treeline, rifle over her shoulder, walking down to their position like this was just another Tuesday. "Heard on our police scanner about the fire," she said calmly. "Heard Kelworth contractors were involved. Figured Jake Mercer might need some backup." "Ma'am," Mills said carefully, "you just engaged in a gunfight with—" "Self-defense," she interrupted. "Those men were firing on police officers. We're all law-abiding citizens here, officer. Just exercising our Second Amendment rights." Mills looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't figure out how. The woman turned to Jake. "You Jake Mercer?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Ruth Caldwell. I live 3 ridges over. Sam Trent used to bring me eggs from his chickens." She looked down at Rya, and her expression softened. "That's Rya. I remember when Sam first got her. Proudest day of his life. And those are her pups." "Yes, ma'am." Ruth reached down and let Rya sniff her hand. Rya's tail wagged once, hesitant but real. "Sam talked about you," Ruth said to Jake. "Never met you, but he knew your daddy. Said if anyone could finish what he started, it'd be Danny Mercer's boy." Jake's throat tightened. "I'm not sure I'm what he thought I was." "You're alive," Ruth said simply. "You're standing. You protected what needed protecting. That's enough." The other locals were emerging from the tree line now. The old man with the hunting rifle, a younger couple with matching camouflage jackets, a teenager who couldn't have been more than 17 with his grandfather's shotgun, all of them looking at Jake like he was something other than the broken Marine he knew himself to be. Mills holstered his weapon. "I should arrest all of you for discharging firearms in self-defense," Ruth repeated firmly. "On our own property. Those contractors were trespassing. We have rights." Mills sighed. "FBI's going to want statements from everyone." "We'll be happy to cooperate," Ruth said sweetly, "after we make sure Jake and these puppies get somewhere safe." As if on cue, the puppies started crying again. All three of them now. Hungry and scared and done with being carried around in a jacket. Ruth's expression melted. "Oh, those poor babies. How old?" "About 3 weeks," Jake said. "They need food, warmth, probably a vet check." She looked at Jake. "Your shack burned down, didn't it?" Jake nodded. He hadn't thought about it until now. But yeah, the forest fire had probably consumed what was left of Trent's cabin. Everything he'd brought with him, everything he owned, gone. "You'll stay with me," Ruth said. It wasn't a question. "I've got a spare room. You and Rya and the pups. At least until you figure out your next move." "I can't." "You can and you will. Sam would have wanted it. Besides, you look like you haven't eaten a real meal in a month." She wasn't wrong. Jake looked at Mills. "Am I free to go?" Mills considered. "FBI's going to want to interview you. But yeah, for now, just don't leave the state." "I won't." Ruth gestured toward a pickup truck parked on the road. "Come on then, let's get those babies fed." Jake followed her, Rya at his heel, the puppies squirming against his chest. The other locals were dispersing, heading back to their homes, satisfied that they'd done what needed doing, protecting their own. Jake climbed into Ruth's truck. Rya jumped in after him, settling at his feet. The interior smelled like coffee and pine needles and something baking. Ruth started the engine and pulled onto the road, driving away from the smoke and chaos. "Thank you," Jake said quietly, "for what you did back there. You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," Ruth interrupted. "Sam was my friend. You're Sam's? I don't know what to call it. Legacy mission heir." "Pain in the ass," Jake suggested. Ruth laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "That too. But you did good, Jake. You did real good. Sam would be proud." Jake looked out the window at the mountains rolling past. "I almost got killed about 6 times in the last 24 hours. But you didn't. And now Kelworth's done. The mountain's safe. The truth's out." She glanced at him. "That's a win in my book." A win. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like survival. Barely. But maybe that's what winning looked like, when you'd forgotten how. They drove for another 15 minutes before Ruth pulled up to a cabin that actually looked like a cabin maintained with flower boxes and a porch that wasn't collapsing. "Home," Ruth announced. "Come on." Inside was warm and lived in. Quilts on the furniture, books on every surface, photos on the walls, kids, grandkids, a man who must have been her late husband. Ruth immediately started pulling things from her refrigerator. "Sit. I'm making you breakfast. And don't argue, you look like a strong wind could knock you over." Jake sat. Rya sat next to him. The puppies had finally gone quiet, exhausted. Ruth pulled out eggs, bacon, bread, started cooking. The smell made Jake's stomach clench with hunger he'd been ignoring for days. "How long since you ate?" Ruth asked. "I don't know. 2 days? 3. Good Lord. She cracked 6 eggs into a pan. "You can't save the world on an empty stomach, Jake." "I wasn't trying to save the world, just Finish what Trent started. Same thing sometimes. She flipped the eggs expertly. Sam told me once that the world doesn't get saved in big moments. It gets saved in small ones. One person deciding to stand when everyone else sits down. One person saying no when everyone else says yes. She plated the food and set it in front of Jake. Eat. Jake ate. He didn't realize how hungry he was until the first bite hit his tongue. Then he couldn't stop. Eggs, bacon toast with butter. Real food. Hot food. Ruth poured him coffee. Black and strong. Better? She asked when he finally slowed down. Yeah, thank you. She sat across from him with her own coffee. So, what now? I don't know, Jake admitted. I don't have a home, don't have a job, don't have anything except what's in my truck if my truck even survived the fire. You've got Rya, you've got her puppies. I can't keep them. I'm living in my truck. Or I was. They need stability. They need you, Ruth interrupted. Rya chose you. That means something. She didn't choose me. Trent trained her to wait for a Mercer. And she could have rejected you anyway. Dogs don't follow commands from people they don't trust, especially not dogs like Rya. Ruth leaned forward. You think she waited 8 months for just anyone? She was waiting for someone worthy, and she found you. Jake looked down at Rya. She was staring up at him with those two intelligent eyes. I'm not worthy, Jake said quietly. I'm just here. Sometimes that's enough. Ruth sipped her coffee. You know what Sam told me right before he died? He said, I'm leaving my war to a man who thinks he's already lost. But broken people fight harder than whole people because they know what it costs to survive. And Jake Mercer is a survivor. Jake's vision blurred. He said that he did. He believed in you before he met you, just like your daddy believed in him before they ever went to war together. Ruth reached across the table and squeezed Jake's hand. You can stay here as long as you need. Get your feet under you. Figure out your next move. No rush. No judgment. One of the puppies started whining again. The female with the white chest patch. She was trying to crawl out of the jacket sling, persistent and determined. Jake carefully extracted her and held her in his palm. She was so small, so fragile. Her eyes were barely focused, but she looked up at him and made a tiny sound. Not scared, just communicating. What's her name? Ruth asked. I haven't named them. Why not? Because I'm not keeping them, Jake said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ruth smiled. Right. Keep telling yourself that. Jake looked at the puppy, at Rya, at Ruth's kind face, and he felt something shift inside his chest. Something that had been frozen for 3 years starting to thaw. I don't know how to do this, Jake whispered. I don't know how to be what they need. Nobody does, Ruth said gently. Not at first. You just show up, day after day. You feed them. You protect them. You love them even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you tried. That's more than most people do. Jake held the puppy against his chest. She immediately burrowed into his shirt, seeking warmth. Okay, Jake said. Okay, I'll try. Ruth's smile widened. That's all anyone can ask. His phone buzzed. Jake checked it. Marcus FBI arrested 3 of the contractors. Other 3 got away, but there's a manhunt. You're safe for now. How are you holding up? Jake typed back, alive. With friends. I'll call you later. Marcus. Good. You're a hero, Jake. Every news outlet wants to interview you. I've been fielding calls all morning. Jake stared at that word. Hero. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a guy who'd stumbled into someone else's war and barely survived. But maybe That's what heroes looked like when they weren't in movies. Ruth stood up. I'm going to set up the spare room for you, and I've got a whelping box in the barn from when my dog had puppies years ago. We'll get these babies somewhere comfortable. She left the room, and Jake sat there in the quiet kitchen, holding a puppy the size of his palm, with Rya pressed against his leg. What do you think? Jake asked Rya. Can I do this? Rya put her paw on his knee. Roger that. Jake smiled, actually smiled. Yeah, okay, we'll figure it out. But what Jake didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that the 3 contractors who'd escaped weren't done. They were angry, desperate, and desperate men with military training were dangerous. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Jake's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. Jake Mercer. A man's voice. Rough. Familiar. Who is this? The guy whose life you spared in the mine. Remember me? Jake's blood went cold. Yeah, I remember. Good. Because I need to tell you something. My buddies, the ones who got away, they're not letting this go. They blame you for everything. For Kelworth collapsing, for Hammond getting arrested, for their lives falling apart. That's not my problem. It is now. Because they're planning something. I don't know what, but I heard them talking before we split up. Something about making sure you never testify against Hammond. Something about tying up loose ends. Why are you telling me this? Silence on the other end. Then, because you let me go. You could have killed me in that mine. You didn't. That means something. So I'm returning the favor. Watch your back, Mercer. They're coming for you. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But they're coming. The line went dead. Jake sat there staring at his phone. Ruth came back into the kitchen. Everything okay? No, Jake said quietly. No, it's not. He told her about the call, about the threat, about the 3 contractors still out there. Ruth's expression hardened. Then we prepare. You're not alone in this, Jake. You've got friends now. Real friends. People who'll stand with you. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. And so will everyone else who was on that mountain today. She pulled out her phone. I'm making calls. We're going to make sure those contractors know they're not welcome here. Ruth? Don't argue with me, Jake. I'm 73 years old, and I've survived 2 husbands, 3 floods, and a heart attack. I'm not scared of some thugs with guns. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to tell her this wasn't her fight. But the truth was, he needed help, needed people, needed to stop trying to do everything alone. Okay, Jake said. Okay, what do we do? Ruth smiled grimly. We do what mountain people have always done. We protect our own. She started making calls, one after another. The old man with the hunting rifle, the young couple, the teenager, other locals Jake hadn't met yet. Within an hour, Ruth's cabin was full of people, 12 of them, all armed, all determined. They gathered in the living room, and Ruth took charge like a general planning a campaign. Jake's received a credible threat, she announced. 3 contractors from Kelworth are still out there. They want revenge, so we're going to make sure Jake and those puppies stay safe until FBI catches them. How long could that take? The old man asked. Days, weeks, doesn't matter. We rotate watches. Someone's always here, always armed, always ready. I can take first watch, the young man said. I've got vacation days saved up. I'll take nights. Someone else volunteered. One by one they committed. No hesitation, no questions. Jake stood there overwhelmed. I don't understand. You don't even know me. Ruth looked at him steadily. Sam Trent was our friend. You finished his work. That makes you family. And we protect family. Family. Jake hadn't had family in 3 years. He'd forgotten what it felt like. His throat closed up. He couldn't speak. Rya, sensing his distress, pressed closer against his leg. Thank you, Jake finally managed. All of you. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Ruth said. This isn't over. Not until those contractors are behind bars, but we're going to make damn sure you survive long enough to see it. The room erupted in agreement. Plans were made. Watch schedules were set. Weapons were checked. And Jake stood in the middle of it all, holding a 3-week-old puppy with a German shepherd at his side and a community of strangers who'd decided he was worth protecting. Maybe Ruth was right. Maybe broken people did fight harder. Maybe survivors attracted other survivors. Maybe this was what winning looked like. Not perfect, not clean, not without cost, but real. And real was something Jake could work with. The puppy in his hand yawned, showing tiny milk teeth, and fell asleep against his chest. Jake looked down at her. "I'm going to name you Hope," he whispered, "because that's what you are." Rya's tail wagged, and for the first time in 3 years, Jake Mercer believed he might actually have a future worth fighting for. But first, he had to survive the present. And the present had 3 armed contractors, somewhere out there planning revenge. Jake looked at Ruth. "What do we do if they come here?" Ruth's expression was stone. "We remind them why you don't mess with mountain people." She racked a round into her rifle. And Jake understood this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about community, about loyalty, about standing up when it would be easier to sit down. This was about finishing what Samuel Trent started. Not just protecting a mountain, protecting each other. "All right," Jake said, feeling something like courage returning. "Let's get ready." Because the storm was coming, and this time Jake wasn't facing it alone. The storm came 3 days later. Not the metaphorical kind, the real kind. Thunder that shook Ruth's cabin. Rain that turned the dirt roads into rivers. Lightning that lit up the mountains like battlefield flares. Jake was on watch duty, sitting in Ruth's living room with his .45 on the coffee table and Rya at his feet. The puppies were asleep in their whelping box, all 3 of them full and warm and growing stronger every day. He'd named them. Couldn't help himself. Hope, the female with the white chest. Trent, the big male who reminded Jake of his father. And Scout, the smallest one who never stopped trying to explore despite legs that barely worked. Names meant commitment. Meant he was keeping them. Jake had stopped pretending otherwise. His phone buzzed. Marcus. "It's late," Jake answered. "What's wrong?" "FBI lost them," Marcus said without preamble. "The 3 contractors. They had eyes on them in Charleston, then lost them 12 hours ago. They could be anywhere." Jake's grip tightened on the phone. "You think they're coming here?" "I think they're desperate and angry and have nothing left to lose. So yeah, I think they're coming." "How long until FBI can get here?" "In this storm, 2 hours minimum. Roads are washing out. They're doing everything they can, but we're on our own until then." "Yeah." Jake stood up, weapon in hand. "Thanks for the warning." "Jake, be careful. These guys are professionals." "So am I," Jake said, and ended the call. He immediately texted the watch rotation group contractors lost in Charleston. "Possibly heading here. Everyone on alert." Responses came fast. Ruth was already awake, moving through her cabin, checking windows and doors. The old man, his name was Earl, texted back that he was grabbing his rifle and heading over. Others confirmed they were ready. Jake looked at Rya. She was already standing alert, reading his body language. "They're coming," Jake told her. "I don't know when, but they're coming." Rya's ears went forward. "Ready." Jake checked his .45 again. Still the same 14 rounds it had been when Ruth had given him fresh ammunition. He had 2 spare magazines now, 42 rounds total. Better than before. Still not great. Ruth came into the living room, her rifle over her shoulder. "Earl's 5 minutes out. Sarah and Tom are coming from the south. We'll have 6 people here within 10 minutes. That's not enough if they come with serious firepower. It's what we've got." Ruth's expression was steel. "And we've held this mountain for 200 years. We're not giving it up now." The thunder cracked again, closer this time. The lights flickered. "If we lose power," Jake started. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Just the sound of rain hammering the roof and Rya's breathing and Jake's own heartbeat. Generator, Ruth said calmly. Give me 30 seconds. Jake heard her moving through the darkness. A door opened. Footsteps on stairs. Then gunfire. Not inside. Outside. Automatic weapons. Close. Ruth, Jake shouted. I'm okay. Stay with the puppies. Jake ran to the window, staying low. Lightning flashed, and in that brief moment of illumination, he saw them. 3 figures moving through the rain. Tactical gear. Weapons up. Approaching the cabin from different angles. Professional assault pattern. They'd waited for the storm. Waited for darkness. Waited for the perfect moment. Smart. Jake grabbed his phone and hit the group text. They're here. 3 contractors, armed. Attacking now. He moved to the door, Rya beside him. The puppies were crying now, sensing the danger. Stay, Jake told Rya. Guard them. Do not leave them. Rya looked at him, torn between protecting her pups and fighting beside Jake. That's an order, Jake said firmly. Guard. Rya reluctantly moved to the whelping box, positioning herself between the door and her babies. More gunfire. Rounds hitting the cabin. Wood splintering. Glass shattering. Jake dropped to the floor and returned fire through the broken window. 3 shots, controlled, aimed at muzzle flashes. One of the contractors yelled something Jake couldn't make out over the storm. The generator kicked on. Lights blazed inside the cabin, making Jake an easy target. He rolled away from the window just as rounds tore through where he'd been. Kept rolling. Came up behind the couch. Ruth emerged from the basement, rifle in hand. How many? 3. They're spreading out, trying to flank us. Earl's still 3 minutes out. We have to hold until... The front door exploded inward, not from gunfire, from a breaching charge. Small but effective. Smoke and debris filled the room. Jake's ears rang. He couldn't see, couldn't hear properly. But he could shoot. He fired blind into the smoke. Once, twice, 3 times. Heard someone curse. Heard boots retreating. Ruth. I'm okay, back door. Jake ran toward the back of the cabin. Rya was barking now, not the warning bark, the combat bark positioned over her puppies like a furry shield. The back door was still intact. Jake braced against the wall beside it, weapon up. Waiting. Thunder. Lightning. Rain. Then the door kicked open. Jake fired. The contractor in the doorway fired back. Rounds passed so close to Jake's head, he felt the displacement of air. The contractor dropped, grabbing his shoulder weapon, clattering away. Jake kicked the weapon out of reach and kept moving. How many inside? Just him, Ruth shouted from the living room. The other 2 are still outside. Jake zip-tied the wounded contractor's hands with ties from Ruth's kitchen drawer. The man was cursing, bleeding, but alive. Where are your friends? Jake demanded. Go to hell. Jake pressed his .45 against the man's wounded shoulder. Where? The contractor screamed. One's circling to the east. The other's got explosives. He's going to burn this place down. Explosives. Of course. Ruth. They've got bombs. I heard. Ruth was at the front window now, firing controlled shots into the darkness. I see one east side, he's... An explosion shook the cabin. Not close. Maybe 20 yards out. But close enough. That was a warning shot. A voice shouted from outside. Send out Mercer and the dog, or the next one comes through your window. Jake looked at Ruth, at Rya, at the puppies crying in their box. He'd gotten these people into this. He couldn't let them die for him. I'm going out, Jake said. The hell you are. Ruth racked another round. We hold until backup arrives. He'll blow up the cabin. The puppies. We'll die if you go out there. They need you alive. Ruth's voice cracked. Sam needed you alive. Don't you dare give up now. Jake's phone buzzed. Earl. Coming up from the south. I see 2 hostiles. Engaging. Gunfire erupted from a new direction. Earl was firing from the tree line, forcing one of the contractors to take cover. The tide was turning, but the contractor with the explosives was still out there. Jake made a decision. He grabbed a flashlight, opened a side window, and fired 2 shots into the air. "I'm coming out," he shouted. "Don't shoot. I'm unarmed." "Jake, no." Ruth grabbed his arm. "Trust me," Jake said quietly. "I'm not giving up. I'm changing the game." He set his .45 on the table, raised his hands, climbed through the window into the pouring rain. The storm hit him like a fist, rain so hard he could barely see, wind that nearly knocked him over. "I'm out," Jake shouted. "Where are you?" A figure emerged from the darkness. Tactical gear, night vision goggles, weapon aimed at Jake's chest. The lead contractor, the one from the mine. "You cost me everything," the contractor said. His voice was raw. "My job, my career, my reputation. Hammond's going to prison and he's taking everyone down with him. I've got nothing left." "Then leave," Jake said. "Leave and start over somewhere else. You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Because if I don't, I'm just another failure, another contractor who couldn't complete the mission." He raised his weapon. "But if I take you out, I'm the guy who got revenge. I'm the guy who settled accounts. That's worth something. It's worth prison. FBI's 5 minutes out. You kill me, you'll spend the rest of your life in a cell. Maybe, but you'll still be dead." Lightning flashed. In that moment, Jake saw the contractor's finger tightening on the trigger. Jake dove left, hitting the mud rolling. The contractor fired. Rounds kicked up mud where Jake had been, but Jake wasn't there anymore. He was moving, circling, using the storm and darkness as cover. The contractor pursued, firing controlled bursts. Professional. Disciplined. But Jake had one advantage. He'd been here for days. Knew this ground. Knew where the rocks were. Where the ditches were. Where the tree line started. He led the contractor away from the cabin. Away from Ruth. Away from Rya and the puppies. Into the forest. The contractor followed, confident he had the advantage. Night vision, body armor, superior firepower. What he didn't have was desperation. And Jake was very, very desperate. Jake stopped behind a tree, breathing hard, trying to think through the adrenaline. He was unarmed, outmatched, about to die in the same mountains where he'd found a reason to live. Ironic. Then he heard barking. Not from the cabin, from right behind him. Rya. She'd left the puppies, broken her guard order. Come after him. "No," Jake whispered. "Rya, go back. Go back to your pups." But Rya wasn't listening. She was staring into the darkness, hackles raised, positioned between Jake and the approaching contractor. The contractor emerged from the rain weapon, up night vision, glowing green. He saw Rya and laughed. The dog, of course. Trent's precious K9. Hammond wanted her dead too, you know. Said she was a liability, a witness. "She's not part of this," Jake said. "Let her go. She's a loose end, just like you." The contractor aimed at Rya. "Say goodbye to," Rya charged. Not barking, not warning, just pure focused violence. She hit the contractor before he could adjust his aim. 80 pounds of muscle and training and protective fury. They went down together, splashing in the mud. The contractor tried to bring his weapon around. Rya went for his arm, jaws clamping down. He screamed. Jake ran forward, grabbed the weapon as it fell, and turned it on the contractor. "Don't move. Don't even breathe." The contractor stared up at him, Rya's teeth still locked on his arm. "You're going to let a dog maul me?" "Rya," Jake said calmly. "Release." Rya let go, but stayed ready, hovering over the contractor like a promise of violence. Jake kept the weapon trained on him. "Where's your friend?" "The one with the explosives." "Probably planting them right now. Probably about to blow your little sanctuary to hell." Jake's blood went cold. The cabin, Ruth, the puppies. He grabbed the contractor's radio from his vest, keyed it. "This is Mercer. I've got your friend. He's down. FBI's here. It's over. Stand down." Static. Then, prove he's down. Jake pressed the radio to the contractor's face. Tell him. The contractor smiled, blood on his teeth. Don't listen to him. Complete the mission. Jake heard it then. A sound he'd learned to recognize in Iraq. A sound that meant you had seconds, not minutes. A timer. Beeping. Getting faster. Somewhere near the cabin, a bomb was counting down. Jake looked at Rya. At the contractor. At the forest between him and the people he'd come to care about. How long? Jake demanded. The contractor just smiled wider. Jake made a decision. He hit the contractor with the butt of the weapon, knocking him unconscious. Then he ran. Rya ran beside him, matching his pace. They burst from the tree line. The cabin was 50 yards away. Jake could see Ruth in the window, could see Earl taking cover behind a tree, could see headlights in the distance, FBI finally arriving. But he could also see the third contractor, on the roof of Ruth's cabin, planting something. "Ruth!" Jake screamed. "Get out! Bomb on the roof!" Ruth's face appeared in the window, confused. "Get out now! Get the puppies and run!" Ruth moved. Jake saw her running through the cabin, grabbing the whelping box, heading for the back door. The contractor on the roof saw Jake and raised his weapon. Jake raised his and fired first. Not at the contractor, at the bomb. It was a stupid plan. Shooting explosives usually made them explode. But sometimes, if you were very lucky or very unlucky, you could disable the trigger. The round hit something electronic. Sparks flew. The beeping stopped. The contractor stared at his bomb in disbelief. Then FBI vehicles came screaming up the road, agents pouring out weapons drawn, shouting commands. "Drop your weapon! Hands up now!" The contractor on the roof raised his hands. Slowly, defeated, agents swarmed him, swarmed the cabin, swarmed the unconscious contractor Jake had left in the forest. It was over. Actually over. Jake dropped the weapon he'd been holding and fell to his knees in the mud, shaking. Rya pressed against him, whining softly. "We did it," Jake whispered. "We actually did it." Ruth emerged from the back of the cabin, whelping box in her arms, puppies crying. She was soaked, covered in mud, and grinning like she'd just won the lottery. "You magnificent idiot," she called out. "You shot a bomb." It worked, didn't it? It could have killed us all. But it didn't. Ruth laughed, wild and relieved and slightly hysterical. Earl joined her, then Sarah and Tom, who'd just arrived. They were all laughing now, the kind of laughter that comes after surviving something you shouldn't have. An FBI agent approached Jake. Young, professional. Entirely too calm for someone who'd just witnessed what Jake had done. "Mr. Mercer, Agent Collins, are you injured?" No, I'm okay." "We need to get you checked out, get a statement. Paramedics are en route." "The contractors. All 3 in custody. You're safe now." Safe. Jake looked at Rya, at Ruth holding the puppies, at Earl and the others who'd stood with him, at Agent Collins and the dozen FBI agents securing the area. He was safe. Actually safe. For the first time in 3 years. "Can I see the puppies?" Jake asked. Agent Collins hesitated. "Sir, you really should." "Please." Collins nodded. 5 minutes, then medical." Jake walked over to Ruth. She set down the whelping box and Jake knelt beside it. The puppies were crying, distressed by all the chaos, but alive, unharmed. Hope looked up at him with eyes that were starting to really focus now. Trent was trying to crawl toward his voice. Scout was already attempting to climb out of the box on wobbly legs. "Hey," Jake said softly. "Hey, it's okay. We're okay. We're all okay." Hope's tiny tail started wagging, and Jake, who'd survived firefights and ambushes and grief and guilt and 3 days of hell, started crying again. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. Ruth put her hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Jake. Sam would be proud. Your daddy would be proud. I almost got you killed. But you didn't. Because you're a fighter. Because you don't quit. Because you're exactly what Sam knew you were. She squeezed his shoulder. A survivor who helps others survive. Jake picked up Hope, held her against his chest. She immediately burrowed into his shirt, seeking warmth. I'm keeping them, Jake said. All 3 of them. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm keeping them. Good, Ruth said. Because they're keeping you too. Rya pressed against Jake's side, and he put his free arm around her. His family. Accidental. Impossible. But real. What now? Earl asked. What happens next? FBI will need statements from everyone, Agent Collins said, approaching the group. The contractors are being charged with attempted murder, arson, domestic terrorism. Hammond's already cooperating, giving up everyone in the corruption chain. This is going to be a major case. And Jake, Ruth asked. Mr. Mercer will need to testify, but after that, Collins looked at Jake. After that, you're free to do whatever you want. The mountain's yours. The mineral rights are permanently protected. You won. Won. There was that word again. Jake looked around at the aftermath. The damaged cabin, the mud and rain, the FBI agents, the people who'd risked their lives for him. I didn't win, Jake said quietly. We won. Ruth smiled. Damn right we did. The rain was letting up now, the storm moving on, the sky starting to lighten with pre-dawn gray. Jake stood there with Hope in one arm. Rya pressed against his side, surrounded by people who'd become family, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Not perfect peace. Not permanent peace. Just a moment of it. Enough to breathe. Enough to remember what it felt like. His phone buzzed. Marcus. You alive? Marcus asked without preamble. Yeah, I'm alive. Jesus, I've been watching the police scanner. It sounded like World War III up there. It felt like it too. FBI got all 3 contractors. They did. Then it's really over. Hammond's going away for 20 years minimum. Kelworth's dissolved. The mountain's protected. You did it, Jake. You finished Sam Trent's war. Jake looked at Rya. At the puppies. At Ruth. No, Jake said. We finished it. Together. Well, however it happened, congratulations. You're about to be famous. Every network wants an interview. There's already talk of a book deal, a movie. You're a genuine American hero now. Hero. Jake still didn't feel like one. But maybe Ruth was right. Maybe heroes were just broken people who chose to stand when they could have sat down. I'll think about it, Jake told Marcus. But right now, I just want to make sure these puppies are okay. And sleep. I really want to sleep. Marcus laughed. Fair enough. Call me when you're ready. No rush. The world can wait. Jake ended the call and looked at Agent Collins. Can we do statements later? I need to get these puppies inside. Get them warm. Collins nodded. Later's fine. We'll be in touch. The FBI started clearing out. The contractors were loaded into vehicles. Crime scene techs were photographing everything. It was organized chaos, but it was winding down. Ruth gestured toward her cabin. Come on, let's get everyone inside. I'll make coffee. We'll figure out what comes next. Jake followed her, Rya at his heel, Hope still tucked against his chest. Inside Ruth's cabin was damaged but standing. Broken windows, bullet holes in the walls. The front door hanging by one hinge. But it was shelter. It was warm. It was safe. Ruth set the whelping box down and started making coffee. Earl and the others were checking the damage, already talking about repairs. Jake sat on the couch, careful to avoid the broken glass, and just breathed. Rya jumped up beside him. Against every rule of dog training, but Jake didn't care. He needed her close. We did it, Jake told her. We actually did it. Rya licked his face. The puppies were settling down now, exhausted from the chaos. Hope fell asleep against Jake's chest. Trent curled up next to Scout, and they both passed out in a tiny puppy pile. Earl sat down across from Jake. "So, what's next for you?" "I don't know," Jake admitted. "I don't have a home, don't have a job, don't know what I'm supposed to do now." "You could rebuild," Ruth said, pouring coffee. "Sam's land is yours. You could build a new cabin, make it a real home." "With what money?" "With the money every news outlet is going to pay you for your story. With the money from a book deal. With the money from people who want to help." Ruth handed him a mug. "You've got options now, Jake. Real options. You just have to choose." Choose. For 3 years, Jake hadn't chosen anything. He'd just existed, floated, survived on autopilot. But now he had to choose what to do, where to go, who to be. He looked at Rya, at the puppies, at Ruth and Earl and the others who'd stood with him. "I want to stay," Jake said quietly. "I want to rebuild the cabin. I want to raise these puppies. I want to be part of this community." Ruth's smile was brilliant. "Then that's what you'll do." "But I don't know how to." "You'll learn. We'll teach you. That's what family does." Family. Jake had lost his family 3 years ago, had thought he'd never have one again. But maybe family wasn't just blood. Maybe it was the people who showed up when things got bad, who stood beside you when it would have been easier to run, who chose you even when you couldn't choose yourself. "Okay," Jake said, feeling something like hope spreading through his chest. "Okay, let's do it." "First things first," Ruth said. "You need to sleep. You look like death warmed over." "I need to check on the puppies. Make sure they're really okay." "They're fine. They've got their mother, and they've got you." Ruth pointed toward the spare room. "Go, sleep. We'll handle everything else." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to stay alert in case something else went wrong, but his body had other ideas. The adrenaline was fading. Exhaustion was crashing over him like a wave. "Okay," he said, "but if anything happens, we'll wake you, I promise." Jake stood up carefully, holding Hope. She didn't wake, just kept sleeping against his chest, warm and trusting. Rya followed him to the spare room. She jumped onto the bed again, against all the rules, and curled up. Jake lay down beside her, Hope still in his arms. Within seconds he was asleep. He dreamed of his son, of his wife, of his father, of Trent. But they weren't sad dreams, they were peaceful ones. Memories without the sharp edges of grief. His father smiling, his son laughing, his wife touching his face with love still in her eyes. And Trent, old scarred wise, saying, "You did good, son. You finished the mission." When Jake woke up, it was afternoon. Sunlight was streaming through the window. Hope was still asleep on his chest. Rya was still curled beside him. And for the first time in 3 years, Jake woke up and didn't immediately wish he hadn't. He woke up and felt grateful. Grateful to be alive. Grateful to have purpose. Grateful to have family again. Even if that family included a German Shepherd and 3 puppies who'd accidentally saved his life by giving him something to protect. Jake heard voices from the other room. Ruth talking to someone. Agent Collins maybe, or Marcus. He carefully moved Hope to the bed beside Rya, who immediately curled around the puppy protectively. Jake stood up and walked to the doorway. Ruth was in the kitchen with a woman Jake didn't recognize. Older, professional-looking, with kind eyes. "Jake," Ruth said. "This is Dr. Patricia Moore. She's a veterinarian. I called her to check on the puppies." "They're okay, right?" Jake asked immediately. "Let me examine them and we'll find out," Dr. Moore said gently. Jake led her to the bedroom. Dr. Moore checked each puppy carefully, professionally, while Rya watched with an intensity that would have been intimidating if Dr. Moore hadn't been completely unfazed. "They're healthy," Dr. Moore finally announced. "A little underweight, but that's normal for puppies who've been through trauma. With proper feeding and care, they'll be fine. Strong genes. Good mother." She looked at Rya. "This is Samuel Trent's K9, isn't it?" "Yeah, her name's Rya." I treated her a few times when Sam was still alive. She's a remarkable dog. And these puppies." Dr. Moore smiled. "They're going to be remarkable too. With proper training, they could be working dogs, service dogs, therapy dogs, whatever you need them to be." Working dogs. Jake looked at the puppies. At Hope, who'd been named for what she represented. At Trent, who carried his namesake's legacy. At Scout, who never stopped exploring. An idea started forming. "Could they be trained for search and rescue?" Jake asked. Dr. Moore's expression brightened. "Absolutely. With their genetics and proper training starting young, they'd be excellent." "What about PTSD support for veterans?" "Even better. German Shepherds are naturally empathetic. And these three," she gestured at the puppies. "They've already bonded with you. They already know trauma and survival. That makes them perfect candidates for support work." Jake felt something click into place. A purpose, a direction, a way forward that honored everything that had happened. "I want to train them," Jake said. "I want to train them and use them to help other veterans, guys like me who are struggling, who need something to hold on to." Ruth appeared in the doorway smiling. "That's a beautiful idea, Jake. I don't know the first thing about training dogs." "Then you'll learn," Dr. Moore said. "I know people, trainers who specialize in working dogs. I can connect you. I don't have money to pay them." "You will. Trust me." Ruth pulled out her phone. "Marcus called while you were sleeping. 3 publishers want to bid on your story. Netflix is interested. You're going to have resources, Jake. The question is what you do with them." What he did with them. Jake looked at Rya. She was staring at him with those 2 intelligent eyes, and he could have sworn she was saying, "Make it count." "Okay," Jake said. "Okay, let's do it. Let's build something that matters, something that helps people." "The Trent Foundation," Ruth suggested. "In honor of Sam. Training dogs to help veterans cope with PTSD, giving them purpose, giving them family." The Trent Foundation. Jake felt his father's presence, felt Trent's approval, felt his son's memory blessing this new direction. "Yeah," Jake said quietly. "Yeah, that's perfect." Dr. Moore shook his hand. "I'll send you information on trainers. And Jake, thank you. For what you did. For finishing Sam's work. For turning tragedy into purpose." She left, and Jake sat down on the bed beside Rya and the puppies. "We're really doing this," he told Rya. "We're building something. Something good." Rya's tail wagged. Hope woke up and immediately crawled toward Jake, whining softly. He picked her up and she licked his chin. "You're going to help a lot of people, little girl," Jake whispered. "You and your brothers. You're going to give broken people a reason to keep living." Just like she'd given him. That evening, Ruth's cabin filled up again. Not with armed defenders this time. With friends. With community. With people who'd come to celebrate survival and plan for the future. They ate together. Laughed together. Told stories about Trent and Jake's father and all the people who'd fought to protect these mountains. And Jake sat in the middle of it all, holding a puppy surrounded by love he didn't think he deserved but was learning to accept anyway. His phone buzzed. A text from his ex-wife. The first communication in 2 years. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Jake stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, Yeah, I'm okay. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually okay." She responded immediately. "I'm glad. You deserve to be happy, Jake. Even if it's not with me." "Thank you," Jake wrote. "That means a lot." It did. More than he'd expected. He pocketed his phone and looked around the room. At Ruth, at Earl, at Dr. Moore who'd stayed for dinner, at Rya and the puppies, his new family, his new purpose, his new life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't without scars. But it was real. And it was his. And that was enough. 6 months later, Jake stood in front of what used to be a falling down shack and was now a real cabin. Not fancy, not perfect, but solid. Built with his own hands and the help of people who'd become family. Rya sat beside him, 8 months pregnant with her second litter. Hope, Trent, and Scout were 6 months old now, gangly teenagers in dog years, all legs and energy and raw potential. "What do you think?" Ruth asked, coming up behind him. "Ready for the grand opening." Jake looked at the sign Earl had carved, the Trent Foundation. "Service dogs for veterans." "I don't know if I'm ready," Jake admitted. "What if I can't help them? What if I'm too broken to fix anyone else?" "Then you'll be exactly what they need," Ruth said. "Because they're broken too, and broken recognizes broken." The first veteran was arriving in an hour. A Marine named David Costa, who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan and was struggling with PTSD so bad, his wife had called the foundation in desperation. Jake had spoken to him on the phone, heard the same emptiness in David's voice that Jake remembered in his own. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Jake had been training Hope specifically for David, teaching her to recognize panic attacks, to provide pressure therapy, to ground someone when reality started slipping away. Hope had taken to it like she'd been born for it. Maybe she had been. "He's early," Ruth said, pointing to a truck coming up the road. Jake's stomach clenched. "I'm not ready." "Yes, you are. Go." Jake walked down to meet the truck, Rya and Hope flanking him. The 3 older puppies stayed back still in training, watching their mother work. David Costa climbed out of the truck, slowly favoring his prosthetic leg. He was maybe 30, with the same haunted eyes Jake saw in the mirror every morning. His wife climbed out the passenger side, young, tired, holding on by her fingernails. "Mr. Mercer?" David asked. "Jake. Just Jake." He held out his hand. David shook it. His grip was weak. Not physically, emotionally, like he'd forgotten how to connect. Jake knew that feeling too. "This is Hope," Jake said, gesturing to the young German shepherd. "She's been training for 3 months specifically for you." David looked at Hope. Hope looked back, then walked over and sat directly in front of him, formal, precise, just like Rya had done with Jake. David's wife, her name was Maria, started crying. "She's beautiful." "She's more than that," Jake said. "She's trained to recognize when you're having a panic attack, when your breathing changes, when your heart rate spikes. She'll alert you before it gets bad. Give you time to use your coping mechanisms." "I don't have coping mechanisms," David said flatly. "I've tried therapy, medication. Nothing works." "Then we'll find what does work," Jake said. "Together. Because that's what this place is about. Not fixing you, just giving you tools to survive." David looked at him for a long moment. "You were in Kandahar. I read about you." "Helmand Province, yeah." "You get it then, what it's like." "Yeah, I get it." "Did it get better for you?" Jake looked at Hope, at Rya, at the cabin he'd rebuilt with his own hands. "It got different," Jake said honestly. "Not perfect, not healed, just different, less sharp, more manageable." "How long did it take?" "I'm still working on it." David's expression cracked just a little, like maybe he'd expected Jake to lie and say everything was fine now. "Come on," Jake said. "Let me show you how Hope works, then we'll talk about what comes next." They spent the next 2 hours working with Hope, teaching David her commands, showing him how she'd alert to his stress, how she'd provide deep pressure therapy by leaning against him, how she'd wake him from nightmares. David was skeptical at first. Then Hope did something that changed everything. David was talking about Afghanistan, about the IED that took his leg and killed his best friend, and his breathing started to change. Getting faster, shallower. Hope immediately moved close and put her paw on his knee. David stopped talking, looked down at her. "She's alerting," Jake said quietly. "Your heart rate's spiking. She can tell." "How?" "Training. Instinct. I don't know exactly, but she knows. So breathe, slow and deep. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. David tried, failed, tried again. Hope pressed closer, providing warmth and weight. On the 3rd try, David's breathing slowed, steadied. The panic attack that had been building never came. Maria was crying again. She stopped it. She actually stopped it. She did, Jake said. And she'll keep doing it, every time. That's her job now. David looked at Jake with something like hope in his eyes. Can I really keep her? She's yours. That's how this works. We train the dog specifically for you. Then she goes home with you, free of charge. The foundation covers everything. I can't afford... You don't have to. That's the point. Jake gestured toward the cabin. Sam Trent left me this mountain. I'm using it to help people who need it. People like us. Why? Because someone helped me when I needed it. Now I'm paying it forward. David's wife came over and hugged Jake, just wrapped her arms around him and held on. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me my husband back. I didn't do anything yet. Hope did. You trained her. You built this place. You cared enough to try. Maria pulled back, wiping her eyes. That's everything. They left 2 hours later. David with Hope in the back seat, already bonding, already learning each other, already becoming the team they needed to be. Jake watched them drive away and felt something warm spreading through his chest. Purpose. Real purpose. Ruth came up beside him. 1 down. How many more to go? As many as we can help, Jake said. What he didn't know yet was that helping veterans would lead to something else entirely. 3 weeks later, Jake was working with Scout training him for a veteran in Tennessee when a black sedan pulled up to the cabin. Not FBI this time. Something else. 2 people climbed out. A man in a suit and a woman in business casual. Both carrying briefcases. Both looking official. Jake's hand instinctively moved toward where his .45 used to be. He didn't carry it anymore. Didn't need to. But old habits died hard. Mr. Mercer, the man called out. I'm Robert Chen from the Department of Defense. This is Dr. Sarah Williams from the VA. We'd like to talk to you about your program. Jake approached slowly Rya at his side. What about it? We've been tracking your success rate, Dr. Williams said. 7 veterans placed with service dogs in 3 months. 0 returns. 100% satisfaction. That's unheard of in this field. We match carefully, Jake said. Train specifically. It's not rocket science. Actually, it kind of is, Chen said. Most programs have a 30% return rate. Dogs that don't bond with their veterans. Veterans who can't adapt to having a service animal. Your program has none of that. We want to know why. Jake looked at Rya, at Scout, who was watching the strangers carefully. Because I know what they're going through, Jake said simply. I was them. 6 months ago, I was living in my truck, trying to figure out if life was worth living. Then a dog waited for me. Gave me purpose. Gave me family. Now I'm giving that to others. Dr. Williams pulled out a tablet. We want to expand your program, provide federal funding, make this a national model. I don't want federal funding. Why not? Because federal funding comes with federal oversight, forms, regulations, bureaucracy. Jake shook his head. These veterans need help now, not after 6 months of paperwork. We can fast track. No. Jake's voice was firm. This program stays independent, stays local, stays focused on helping people instead of checking boxes. Chen and Dr. Williams exchanged glances. What if we offered a different arrangement? Chen said. Not funding. Partnership. You train the dogs. We identify veterans who need them. VA covers medical expenses. You maintain complete operational control. Jake considered. No government oversight. Minimal. Quarterly reports. That's it. And if I say no to a veteran you send me, your call, always. Jake looked at Ruth, who'd come out of the cabin to listen. She nodded slightly. Okay, Jake said, but I have conditions. Veterans get matched based on need, not paperwork. Dogs stay with their partners for life, no questions. And if your bureaucracy gets in the way of helping people, I walk. Agreed, Dr. Williams said immediately. They shook hands. Chen pulled out contracts. Jake read every word before signing. When they left, Ruth was grinning. You just took a government partnership and made it work for you. Sam would be impressed. Or horrified. Both probably. Ruth laughed. But you did good. This means you can help more people. Isn't that the point? It was. But it also meant more responsibility, more pressure, more chances to fail. Jake looked at the puppies. 8 more had been born to Rya 2 months ago, all healthy, all showing promise. Scout and Trent were in advanced training. Hope was thriving with David. It was working. Actually working. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something he wasn't ready for. He was right. 2 days later, Jake got a call from a number he didn't recognize. This is Jake. Mr. Mercer, my name is Thomas Brennan. I'm an attorney representing Curtis Hammond. Jake's blood went cold. Hammond's in prison. For now, he's appealing his conviction. Claims the evidence against him was obtained illegally. Claims you and Samuel Trent conspired to frame him. That's bullshit. Maybe. But he's got good lawyers. And they've filed a motion to suppress the evidence from Trent's USB drive. If that gets thrown out, most of the case collapses. What does this have to do with me? Hammond's legal team wants to depose you. Ask questions about how you obtained the evidence. About Trent's mental state when he compiled it. About whether you tampered with anything. I didn't tamper with anything. I believe you. But you'll need to prove it in court, and Hammond's lawyers are very good at making honest people look dishonest. Brennan paused. I'm calling because I think you need representation. Someone who can protect you while you're protecting Trent's legacy. I can't afford a lawyer. I'm offering pro bono. I knew Sam Trent. Respected him. I want to make sure his work stands up in court. Jake closed his eyes. He'd thought it was over. Thought Hammond being in prison meant the fight was finished. He should have known better. Okay, Jake said. When's the deposition? 2 weeks, in Charleston. They'll ask you everything. Your military record, your mental health, your relationship with Trent. They'll try to break you. I've been through worse. Have you? Brennan's voice was gentle. Because from what I understand, you've been through hell. And Hammond's team is going to drag you through it again. Make you relive your worst moments. Use your pain against you. Jake's hands started shaking. So what do I do? You tell the truth. You stay calm. And you let me handle the rest. Brennan paused. Can you do that? I don't know. Then we'll work on it. I'll come to you. We'll prep. We'll make sure you're ready. They hung up, and Jake sat there staring at nothing. Rya came over and put her head on his knee. It's not over, Jake told her. I thought it was over, but it's not. Rya's eyes said what they always said. We'll get through it. Jake wasn't sure he believed her this time. The next 2 weeks were torture. Brennan came to the cabin every day asking questions, preparing Jake for what Hammond's lawyers would throw at him. They asked about his discharge, about his wife, about his son, about the 47 days he'd spent not talking to anyone before buying the shack. They asked about his mental health, his drinking, his thoughts of suicide. They asked about Samuel Trent, about how Jake had found the USB drive, about whether he'd altered anything. By the end of each session, Jake was exhausted, hollowed out, wondering if he had the strength to face Hammond's lawyers. Ruth kept him fed, kept him grounded, kept reminding him why this mattered. It's not about you, she said one evening. It's about making sure Hammond stays in prison, making sure Kelworth doesn't rise from the ashes, making sure Trent's sacrifice meant something. I know. Do you, because you look like you're about to run again? Jake looked at her sharply. I'm not running. Good. Because that mountain's depending on you. Those veterans are depending on you. Those puppies are depending on you. Ruth's voice softened. And we're depending on you. Don't quit now. Jake wanted to argue, wanted to say he was tired of being depended on. But he couldn't. Because she was right. The deposition was in a conference room in Charleston. Sterile. Cold. With cameras recording everything and a court reporter taking down every word. Hammond's lawyers were exactly what Jake expected. Expensive suits, predatory smiles, questions designed to trap and confuse. The lead attorney was a woman named Victoria Cross. 40-something, sharp as broken glass. Mr. Mercer, let's start with your military service. You were honorably discharged, correct? Yes. After assaulting a superior officer. After defending local translators who were being abandoned to the Taliban. The assault charge was dropped. I was honorably discharged with full benefits. But you did strike a lieutenant colonel. I did. So you have a history of violence when you disagree with authority, Brennan interrupted. Objection. Argumentative. I'll rephrase. Mr. Mercer, would you say you have difficulty following orders? No. I have difficulty following immoral orders. Cross smiled. I see. And when Samuel Trent left you evidence against Kelworth? Security, did you consider that an order? I considered it a request, from a dying man, to finish what he started. But you didn't know Mr. Trent, had never met him. Why would you risk your life for a stranger's request? Because he knew my father. Because he left me his dog. Because it was the right thing to do. The right thing. Interesting. Cross pulled out a document. Mr. Mercer, this is your intake form from when you purchased the property. It says you were living in your vehicle. Is that correct? Yes. And you bought a condemned property for $5 because... Jake's jaw tightened. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because you were suicidal. Brennan stood up. That's inappropriate and irrelevant. It's relevant to Mr. Mercer's mental state. Was he capable of accurately assessing the evidence Mr. Trent left him? Or was he looking for meaning in a meaningless situation because he was desperate? Jake's hands clenched under the table. Rya sitting beside him as his certified emotional support animal pressed against his leg. I wasn't looking for meaning, Jake said quietly. I was looking for a place to die quietly. Then I found 3 puppies and a dog who needed me to stay alive. So I did. And when I found Trent's evidence, I verified it. I didn't alter it. I didn't make it up. I just made sure the truth got out. The truth according to a dead man and a suicidal Marine. That's what you're calling evidence. The truth according to documents, photos, emails, financial records, things that can be verified by anyone who bothers to look. Did you look? Or did you just assume Mr. Trent was being honest? I looked. I spent hours going through every file, every photo, every piece of evidence. And it was all real, all verifiable, all pointing to the same conclusion: Hammond and Kelworth were corrupt. Cross leaned forward. Or Mr. Trent was a paranoid old man who compiled circumstantial evidence and convinced you it meant something because you were vulnerable and desperate for purpose. Jake's vision started to tunnel. His breathing got shallow. Rya stood up and put her paw on his knee. The alert. Jake forced himself to breathe. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Mr. Trent wasn't paranoid, Jake said when he could speak again. He was thorough, and he was right. Hammond's in prison because the evidence was real, not because I was desperate. That's what we're here to determine. The deposition went on for 4 more hours. Question after question. Trap after trap. Cross trying to break him. Trying to make him admit doubt. Trying to make him look unstable. But Jake had been through worse interrogations. Had been trained to resist. Had learned in the mountains that he was stronger than he thought. He held the line. When it was finally over, Brennan walked him out to the parking lot. You did good, Brennan said. Better than I expected. You stayed calm, told the truth, didn't take the bait. Will it be enough? I think so. Cross was trying to create reasonable doubt, but you didn't give her much to work with. The evidence speaks for itself. When will we know? Judge will rule on the motion to suppress within 30 days. Brennan shook his hand. Go home, Jake. Take care of those dogs. Let me worry about the legal stuff. Jake drove home in silence. Rya beside him and tried not to think about what would happen if Hammond's lawyers won. If the evidence got thrown out. If Hammond went free. If everything Jake had fought for meant nothing. But when he got back to the cabin, there were 3 cars in the driveway. Veterans. Coming for their dogs. Ruth was on the porch grinning. Surprise! While you were in Charleston, we got 3 emergency referrals. All of them critical. All of them need help now. Jake looked at the veterans. At their desperate eyes. At their families trying to hold everything together. He looked at Trent Scout and 3 of Rya's new puppies all ready for placement. All trained. All waiting. Okay, Jake said, exhaustion falling away. Let's do this. They spent the next 6 hours matching dogs with veterans, teaching commands, building bonds, creating teams. By the time the last veteran left a woman named Sarah who'd served in Iraq and was struggling with crippling anxiety, Jake was physically and emotionally drained. But he was also filled with something he hadn't expected. Joy. Real joy. The kind that comes from knowing you helped someone. Knowing you made a difference. Knowing your pain had purpose. Ruth brought him coffee, and they sat on the porch together, watching the sun set over the mountains. 3 more lives saved, Ruth said quietly. Because of you. Because of Trent. Because of my father. Because of everyone who fought to protect this mountain. Because of you, Ruth repeated firmly. You could have walked away, could have taken Hammond's money and disappeared. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought. You built something that matters. Jake sipped his coffee and thought about Hammond's deposition, about Cross's accusations, about whether the evidence would hold up in court. What if it all falls apart? Jake asked. What if Hammond gets out and comes after me again? Then we fight again. That's what we do. We fight until we win, or we die trying. Ruth looked at him. But I don't think it's going to fall apart. I think you're going to win. Because the truth is on your side. The truth doesn't always win. No. But it wins more often when good people fight for it. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from David Costa, the first veteran to receive a dog. Hope saved me again tonight. Panic attack at the grocery store. She alerted before it got bad. I was able to use my breathing exercises and get through it. Thank you for giving me my life back. Jake showed Ruth the message. She smiled. See, that's why you fight. That's why none of this is for nothing. She was right. But Jake was still scared, still worried, still wondering if he was strong enough to keep carrying this weight. Rya came over and put her head on his knee. The gesture that had become their language. The promise that they'd get through it together. Yeah, Jake said quietly. Yeah, okay. We'll keep fighting. The judge's ruling came 3 weeks later. Jake was training 2 new puppies when Brennan called. We won, Brennan said simply. Judge denied the motion to suppress. Said the evidence was legally obtained and clearly authentic. Hammond's appeal is dead. Jake sat down hard on the ground, puppies climbing all over him. We won. You won. Hammond staying in prison. Kelworth staying dead. The mountains staying protected. It's over, Jake. It's really over. Jake couldn't speak. Couldn't process it. After 6 months of fighting, of testifying, of reliving trauma, of wondering if it had all been for nothing. It was over. Actually over. Jake, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. Just processing. Take your time. You earned it. Brennan paused. For what it's worth, you're the toughest client I've ever had. Most people would have cracked under that deposition. You didn't. You held the line. Held the line. The thing Marines do. The thing Jake had forgotten he knew how to do. Thank you, Jake said, for everything. Thank Trent. He's the one who started this. You just finished it. They hung up, and Jake sat there in the grass with puppies crawling over him and Rya beside him, and the mountains stretching out forever. Ruth came running out of the cabin. Was that Brennan? What did he say? We won. Hammond's staying in prison. It's over. Ruth let out a whoop that probably carried 3 ridges over. She grabbed Jake and hugged him so hard his ribs protested. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Jake corrected. All of us. Within an hour, the cabin was full again. Earl and Sarah and Tom and Dr. Moore and Marcus, who'd driven up from Charleston, and a dozen other people who'd stood with Jake when it would have been easier to run. They celebrated, laughed, told stories about Trent and Jake's father, and all the people who'd fought to protect what mattered. And Jake sat in the middle of it all, holding a puppy surrounded by love, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Whole. Not perfect, not unmarred, but whole. A month later, Jake stood on his rebuilt porch watching the sun rise over the mountains and thought about how far he'd come. 6 months ago, he'd been a broken Marine trying to disappear. Now he was the director of a foundation that had placed 23 service dogs with veterans, had a waiting list of 50 more, had partnerships with the VA and DoD, had a community that felt like family, had a purpose that went beyond survival. Rya came out and sat beside him, her 8 new puppies tumbling after her. Hope, Trent, and Scout were with their veterans, now saving lives, providing support, giving people reasons to keep living. Just like Rya had done for Jake. His phone rang. Unknown number. Jake almost didn't answer. Then he did. Is this Jake Mercer? A young man's voice, shaking, desperate. Yeah. Who's this? My name's Private First Class James Miller. I just got back from Afghanistan 3 weeks ago. I can't sleep, can't eat, can't function. My buddy told me about your program, said you help veterans who are struggling. I do. Tell me what's going on. James started talking, and as he talked, Jake recognized every word, every feeling, every desperate thought, because Jake had been there, had felt that, had survived it. James, Jake said when the kid finally ran out of words, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What you're feeling right now, it's not permanent. It feels like it is, but it's not. I know because I've been exactly where you are. How did you get through it? Jake looked at Rya, at the puppies, at the mountains that had almost killed him and then saved him. I stopped trying to do it alone, Jake said. I let people help me. I found something to protect, something to care about. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice I started feeling human again. How long did it take? I'm still working on it, but I'm alive, and I'm helping other people stay alive, and that's enough. Silence on the other end. Then, can you really help me? Yeah, I can. When can you get here? Tomorrow. Tomorrow's perfect. We'll match you with a dog, teach you how to work together, give you tools to survive. Jake paused. And James? You're going to make it. I promise you that. You're going to make it. How do you know? Because you called, because you asked for help, because you're still fighting. That's all it takes. Just keep fighting. We'll do the rest. They talked for another 20 minutes, made plans, set appointments, gave James something to hold on to. When Jake hung up, Ruth was standing in the doorway. Another one, she asked. Another one. How many does that make? I've stopped counting. There's always more. There's always someone else who needs help. And you're going to help all of them. Jake looked at the mountains, at the cabin he'd rebuilt, at Rya and her puppies, at the foundation that had grown from a desperate Marine and a patient dog. Yeah, Jake said quietly. Yeah, I'm going to try. Because someone helped me when I needed it. Now I'm paying it forward. For as long as it takes. For as many people as I can reach. Sam would be proud, Ruth said. So would my father. So would your son. Jake's throat tightened. You think so? I know so. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. You took your trauma and used it to heal others. That's what heroes do, Jake. Real heroes. Hero. That word again. Jake still wasn't sure he deserved it. But maybe that was okay. Maybe heroes weren't people who felt heroic. Maybe they were just people who showed up, day after day. Who fought when it would have been easier to quit. Who chose to help even when they weren't sure they had anything left to give. Maybe heroes were just survivors who refused to let anyone else suffer alone. The sun climbed higher. The puppies started playing in the grass. Rya watched them with the same intense focus she'd watched Jake with 6 months ago. And Jake stood on his porch, his home, his foundation, his purpose, and made a promise to Samuel Trent and his father and his son and everyone who'd believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. He'd keep fighting, keep helping, keep turning pain into purpose. For as long as it took, for as many people as he could reach, because the mountain had given him a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. A young veteran named James was coming tomorrow, and Jake would be there, ready to help, ready to show him that survival was possible, that healing was possible, that life was possible even after you'd lost everything. Because Jake Mercer, the Marine who'd bought a $5 shack planning to disappear, had discovered something that saved his life. You don't heal alone, you heal together. You protect what can't protect itself. You stand when everyone else sits down. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find a dog who refuses to let you die. Who waits for you? Who tests you? Who saves you by giving you something worth living for? Rya looked at Jake, and her tail wagged once. Mission complete. Jake smiled and scratched behind her ears. No, girl. Mission's just beginning. Because there would always be another veteran who needed help. Another person struggling to find a reason to stay alive. Another chance to turn tragedy into hope. And Jake Mercer would be there. Every time. Standing on a mountain that had almost killed him and became his salvation. With a dog beside him. A community behind him. And a purpose that finally made the pain worth surviving.